Hello, everyone, and welcome to a tier list. Yes, one of these fucking things. Recently, I watched a couple of YouTube videos from YouTuber Cruza Complex and Coffee Potato, and they both made tier lists of Final Fantasy Tactics A2 jobs. And that's a little random, you know, but I have always been like a fan of this game, and I played it ever since it came out. And I think I have, it's got to be reaching like 1,000 hours at this point in the game. It's got to be close. Um, if not, like it may be just a little under. But I would like to say that I have enough knowledge of this game that I could throw my hat into the ring and give my 2 cents on these jobs. Because both YouTubers that I watched said some things that I agree with, said some things I disagree with. So I'm just like, you know what? I am going to make my own. And so here we are. I should say right away that when I consider where I place jobs on the tier list, I consider stack growths. I consider the impact of the skills that they learn, like you know, how much damage they do, or like how much, like the range of the skills, blah blah blah. And not only do I consider like how much impact the skills that they learn have, I also consider how many of those skills that a class can learn. I also sometimes consider equipment where it's applicable. Most jobs, I'm not one to really be too picky on the equipment that much, especially if a job can accomplish something else. That usually outshadows equipment choice, but sometimes I will bring it up and say that, okay, this is lower or higher because of this. I also consider if that job class learns important support skills, because I think it's a little criminal to undercut a job's importance um, by not bringing up, like, if they learn a support skill that's essential for other stuff. And then lastly, I also consider if the job has good synergy with other jobs. And yes, so when it comes to the tiers, S tier is defined by one of two things. If you can deploy a job all by itself, just one unit with that job, and they can reliably win the fight on their own, then they're an S tier. Another thing is that if that class is a support class, but the support they provide is essential to making multiple different classes usable or viable, then they are also an S tier. A tier is for the good jobs, the jobs that you'll be happy to always have, but they usually are lacking something that makes them S tier. B is average, so the jobs that I put here are typically better as like secondary jobs to other job classes. They can also be okay on their own, but they mostly get outclassed by A and S tier jobs. C is the situational tier. Jobs are not normally considered good in this tier. However, they usually provide something unique or gimmick or something that you can use on occasion. Even with the quirks that they have, though, you'll usually not want to use them outside of the fights that you design them for. And D tier is the bad tier. Jobs that go in here are bad in pretty much every way. They are outclassed by everything else, essentially, and it is rare to see them have anything unique that you can make use of. However, in D tier, at least the jobs in D tier will provide something positive in some way and don't actively hurt you to use them. And then the never used tier is for the jobs that you just shouldn't be using ever, under any circumstance. And yeah, that's it. So this video is going to be a long one, so buckle up. So let's just start with the top here. Chocobo Knight. We are starting off strong. Never use. So I just told you that units in here actively hurt you to use them, and that's true for the Chocobo Knight. Baseline, every single job should have access to their primary skills, a secondary set of skills of their choosing, reaction abilities, and supports. Chocobo Knights do not give that to you. If you're using Chocobo Knights without a Chocobo, you only have access to the secondary set of skills that you give them. Okay, and it isn't until you mount a Chocobo that you get the Chocobo Knight's primary set of skills. However, once you do mount a Chocobo, you don't get access to your secondary set of action skills. So, even if you want to use their like gimmick of mounting Chocobos, it hurts you. It hurts you either or. The only thing good about Chocobo Knight is the fact that they have the highest speed growth in the entire game at 99%. However, that doesn't really matter on Moogles because, as you'll find out later, Moogles really only have one class that you want to put them on, and the speed growth in that class is good enough that it doesn't matter if, you know. So you don't really need to use Chocobo Knight for their speed growth unless you're really trying to make Moogles work. And if you're doing that, I mean, who hurt you? Moogles are designed to be one thing and one thing only. And if you're not doing that, you're just... I don't know what to tell you. But, yes, moving on. So we have new Mou White Mage. I should probably... And where's the Hume one there? All white mages are B tier in my opinion. They are really good as secondary classes. All three races have access to have MP, so all three types of white mages can cast their magic at half cost if you want. White mage have really good stuff in their action list. Like, they have access to refresh, which is the best cleanse you can get. They have re-raise, they have a-raise, they have all three tiers of healing spells. They're just really good at keeping stuff alive and keeping your units undebuffed. However, unfortunately, even though they provide all these good things to help, like, with your survivability in fights, that's not enough in this game, because especially late game, why would you bring a white mage that keeps you alive when you can one-shot everything on the field and win the fight in 2 turns anyway? So, it's really... I really do like the white mages, but they're all just... Unfortunately, this game's pace of play doesn't really support them. Maybe early game, they're good, but by the time you get access to their good skills, it's too late for them, unfortunately. So, like I said, they're usually pretty good as like secondary actions to another class, just so that you have access to it if you want it, but yeah. That's all I really have to say about that. They also have access to Turbo MP, which is funny. You'll only use it on Turbo MP on Viera and Human for gimmick purposes, but yeah. Next is Tinkerer. Never use. Tinkerer's skills are, hey, toss a coin, and if it's heads, your enemies get debuffed, and if it's tails, you get debuffed. So the class is like a 50-50 on whether or not you hurt yourself. That's fun. That's good. I think that justifies never used here. Tinkerers provide decent tank stack growths, but so does Moogle Knight. So, okay. Now we have, I think this is Warrior. Warrior's D tier. They have an interesting skill, which is one of their, like, it's one of the last skills you can learn on them. But the skill is called Life Tap, and it essentially is like a gravity spell. You will need to accuracy up buff it to use it, I'm pretty sure. But if you, like, let's say you're playing Templar and you have Warrior as your secondary actions, I mean, God forbid, but if you do, your Spear, Life Tap works on both tiles of the Spear attack range, so you could gravity 2 units. Very gimmicky, and definitely not worth bringing this unit out of D tier. It's a decent, like, melee unit, but unfortunately just being good with your auto attacks is not something that is needed in this game. All of its skills are pretty bad. It gets Ren speed, but there are other classes in the game that provide you with minus speed debuff on enemies that also do damage. So, yeah. The only thing really I like about Warrior is that they have the highest HP growth out of any manga job. So, if you're trying to build tank, you could throw this class on them for a little bit, and they also have they have high enough attack growth that it's good for training, but otherwise don't really use this unit. I mean, all of their skills they're just not enough. You know, even early game, they're like, wow, I would rather just do damage, you know. So, next we have Spellblade. Definitely high B tier. I struggle with Spellblade a little bit because I really value blood price. Well, I shouldn't say that. I value blood price in combination of some other things. However, I have to be honest with myself. I'm never using Spellblade as my primary job ever. Their skills are useful under specific scenarios as secondaries to other things. There is a gimmick where you could turbo MP your Spellblade, and it causes your Spellblade arts to do 2.25 times damage, which is higher than you would normally get out of like a regular turbo MP buff. So you get extra value on Spellblade, but it's not enough, man. However, they are good. Their skills are good. Being able to do damage and a chance to cause some pretty nasty debuffs, and debuffs that you don't really get like easily. Like, they have one of the only accesses to oil as a status effect. We'll get to it in a second, but blue mages have really easy access to oil as well, but you know, it's something. They have access to oil. They also have Doom as a status effect, which is kind of hard to get your hands on as well. But it's not enough, in my opinion, for the class to kind of stand out on its own. You can do it, but I would much rather have this be like secondary to something like Sniper. Because then on Sniper you get all of the Spellblade arts, but at bow range. So, and I believe Spellblade's stat growths are not even that good anyway. Yeah, the thing about I hear people talk about Spellblade being like a decent, like a level up job. No. If you want attack growths, you play Sniper. If you want like tank growths, you use Fencer. And Viera already don't have access to a good defense and resist growths, but this job gets outclassed in stat growths with basically anything else. So don't use this class to like level up for your stats. But yeah, I think that's it. Blue mage. Okay. I have to think. Blue mage. I think it's A tier. I have to be honest with myself. Like I said earlier, S tier, you need to either be able to deploy the unit by itself and be able to win the fight reliably, or it needs to have supports so good that they enable other jobs single-handedly. And unfortunately, Blue Mage have neither. You could probably win some fights as Blue Mage on its own, but its skills aren't really. Actually, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Hold on. I have to pull up. I have the wiki open on the side just so that I don't mix up my stat growths and stuff. You know what? I am gonna put it S tier. When people bring up Blue Mage, they like to be like, "Oh, you just spam roar and that's it," and so that way, enemies don't have buffs. And I don't really agree with that too much. Yes, enemies do have buffs that they use all the time, but a lot of the time you can just kind of ignore them. It's only like the truly nasty stuff that roar is good for, and that doesn't really show up too often, in my opinion. What I like Blue Mage for is their access to White Wind, which is the best healing option you have in the entire game. Because White Wind heals everybody equal to the amount of HP that the caster has. So if your Blue Mage is untouched, it's essentially like early game. It's a 100-point heal, which is like ×3 better than anything your White Mages can do. And in late game, it could be upwards of 500, 600 HP heal, which is just insane. And they also have access to Angel Whisper, which gives you re-raise. Re-raise is hard to get your hands on. So, and like typically you'd only see that in your White Mages, but Blue Mage can do that. So already Blue Mage kind of outclasses White Mage in every way. That's the one thing that White Mage has over Blue Mage, is that White Mage has refresh. However, Blue Mage then substitutes that by having Roar, by having Dragon Force, by having Mighty Guard, and by having Expose Weakness, which is the Dragon skills. They have access to Self-Destruct, which is, I mean, it's not crazy, but it's useful in a pinch. They have access to War Dance, which is pretty good. And the reason why I decided to put it in S tier is because Angel Whisper and White Wind alone basically makes you, or I should say, Angel Whisper alone kind of makes you unkillable, especially with the half MP support skill. And then you could just buff yourself with like Mighty Guard and Dragon Force, and then you can just go to town on people and take almost no damage. So yeah, and then also on top of that, if you have buffs on your own team that you want to keep, you don't have to use Roar. They also have access to Eerie Soundwave, which it removes buffs on single targets, so that's kind of good. Yeah, they're just a really good support class. I could see people wanting to put this in A tier, but I think it's enough. It can kind of stand on its own. Okay, Sniper. Let me see. I kind of pre-sorted the classes. Okay, I did put it in A tier. Sniper class is slept on, in my opinion. The other YouTubers that I watched, they're like, oh, it doesn't really provide much. Sniper has the highest attack growth out of any Viera job class. They have it's on the lower end of speed for Viera, but 59% is still good. And like their survivability, like their tank stats they're just average to below average. But you shouldn't really be getting hit by snipers, or your sniper shouldn't really be getting hit too often anyway. So the fact that they get tank stats at all should be enough to keep them alive. But most people, they just look at sniper and they're like, oh, they have double shot, and they're like, that's not enough. I disagree. I think double shot is definitely enough to carry the class. But even if you're not spamming double shot, You also have access to Beso Toxico, which is a damage plus a chance to poison a target. They have access to Doom Skill. They have access to the ability to go invisible. They have Marksman Spite, which is really interesting. You need accuracy up to use it like reliably, but Marksman Spite is one of those skills where it does damage based on how much damage you have taken. So, like, if you have 500 HP and you're at 100 when you cast the skill, you'll deal 400 damage, which is really good. It can get you some of the higher damage numbers in the game. But even on top of that, they have the ability to destroy armor and weapons, which is actually pretty good. I think it's underrated how strong being able to destroy equipment is in this game. Because there are a lot of tough fights against like non-monster races that are just made so much easier by being able to destroy their armor and weapons. So, and then on top of that, you usually pair sniper with something like with Spellblade. That way you can use all of the Spellblade skills at the range of a sniper. So what you could do is you could go Sniper primary, Spellblade secondary, Turbo MP support, and then your first turn you use double shot, your second turn you use a Spellblade art, your third turn you use double shot, your fourth turn you use a Spellblade art, and it's all at range, and you're just kind of pissing out damage from this class at that point. I kind of value that a lot. And then even if you're not doing that, another cool thing you could do that also gets slept on, in my opinion, is Viera have the Archer job, and Archer provides focus, and usually focus on its own is pretty bad because all it does is double your next auto attack damage. Which, at that point, why don't you just attack twice instead? But because you can you have access to double shot with sniper, you can focus turn 1 and then double shot turn 2, and then you're doing 4 times damage because it applies focus to both hits of double shot. So you do have access to that. It's not really that reliable, but you can do that, and especially early game I like doing that, and it just allows you to basically say, okay, this unit exists, not anymore. It's really good early for that before you have access to Parivir and those kind of shenanigans. So, yeah, I don't know. I just really like Sniper. I don't see a valid reason to put them lower than B or C or to put them lower than A tier. And like I hear you when you say, oh, they're just double shot, that's it. I hear that, but like you're kind of missing the point, like the other stuff that Sniper provides on purpose, in my opinion, when you say stuff like that. So, anyways, next up we have Fusilier. This is probably gonna be my only, if not one of very few, controversial placements. I think Fusilier is kind of bad. I think they're situational. Fusilier do have some things going for it. They have access to elemental shots. They have fire shot, bolt shot, and ice shot. And you could do something cute with Fusiliers, and that's give them the Geomancer support skill, because Moogles do have access to Black Mage. And so your ice, fire, and bolt shot will do more damage. The problem is that your skills are already doing really low damage. And I don't... Let me check if I can... I don't know if the fire, ice, and bolt shots are based on your magic stat, or if it's based on your physical stat. And it doesn't say here on the wiki either, which is kind of annoying. But like, even if the fire, ice, and bolt shot was based on your physical attack stat, Fusilier don't have the greatest attack growth anyway. So you'll need to be leveling up as like a Moogle Knight if you want attack growths. And even then, I find that they just don't do a lot of damage. Like even though they have crazy range, it's just they don't do enough. And they're also slow. Well, actually, 54 is not bad. But compared to like your other units that you're usually having higher speed stat in, they're kind of slow. Um, so you don't get their turns as often as you would like. Their damage output is on the lower end in my opinion, and like I honestly think that their elemental shots are based on their magic stats, so you kind of need to level up as Black Mage if that's the case. And it's just that's not enough. So that's why like the other YouTubers that I mentioned earlier, they usually bring up Stop Shot and Charm Shot. The problem is that they're only a chance to cause those status effects. It is good that they have like its damage plus the chance to cause those status effects. But if you're looking for the stop status effect or like a charm status effect, there are other classes that do it but better. Yes, Fusilier do it at like one of the longest ranges of the game, but it's still only a chance to do that. And I don't know. I just find that everything that Fusilier does, you can find in other classes, in other jobs that do it just better. Maybe it's just me, but like I don't know. I don't give Fusilier respect. I just don't. Yeah, I mean I because like the thing is like you can't even use it as a secondary to anything because you need guns to use their. Actually, is that true? Is that true? It might not be true. So you could I think use their skills as on another class, but why would you? Another problem with Fusilier that I haven't brought up is that it's Moogle only. And if you're not using your Moogles as jugglers, you're using Moogles wrong. Fusilier's like the only other class that I would allow people to get away with using their Moogles on, but otherwise, so, and if you're using a Juggler, Fusilier secondary is not that great because Juggler has access to stop as well, and a stop that's at range as well. It's not as long range as Fusilier, but Juggler does have access to range stop. And it's a little bit more reliable, in my opinion. Um, but yeah, that's all I really have to say about that. They do have access to the concentration support ability, so if you want your stop and charm to land more often, you can run concentration. Um, but yeah, like I said, this is probably going to be one of the more controversial ones. I just don't respect Fusilier, and that's just all I have to say about that. Okay, so we have Master Monk, S tier. You could field this thing by itself, maybe with White Monk as well as its secondary, and it will be able to win fights on its own. It's tanky. It shits out damage. It has good self support. Like it has a skill that heals itself and cleanses all of like any debuffs that you have. And then if you have like the White Monk as its secondary action set, which you should do, you have access to damage at range. Like that's the downside to Master Monk is that it doesn't have good ranged options. But then you just put White Monk as its secondary abilities, and then you're laughing. Yes, I don't really have much to say about Master Monk, just because it just shits out damage. It has access to the same thing as Marksman Spite, where it does damage based on your missing HP. You do need to accuracy up that, but that's how it is. Oh, one thing I should bring up that doesn't get talked about a lot, because they're too busy being like, "Oh, Pummel is really good." They have access to cross counter, which if you're attacking things that have any counter ability, whether it's counter, strike back, blind count, or blink counter, or bone crusher, you can use cross counter, and cross counter does double damage, or double your physical damage, and it also ignores their counter reaction ability. Which, I mean, sure, you could just use pummel, but I mean, you know, you don't want to be getting hit with counter attacks, so cross counter is actually really good. It doesn't get talked about a lot. They also have access to destroy armor, which is good. Yeah, they're just really good damage dealers. Their growths are great. With 11 attack growth, which is tied with Dragoon. Their tank stats are serviceable, and they have a good speed growth. I think it's the second best speed growth out of Abanga classes. So, yeah, I mean, again, there's not much else I can really say about that. Hey, Paladin. Paladin is A tier. The problem with Paladin that doesn't make it S tier is that Paladins don't have the greatest skills ever. Their skills are fine. They're the only access to cover, which is essential in some missions. Their nurse skill is fine early game. It restores HP and removes debuffs in an area. They also have access to Saint Cross, which is a ranged holy damage, which is pretty. It's it's all right. And then if you have like Turbo MP, which means you can only use the skill every other turn if that's the case. But if you do use Turbo MP on Paladin, your Saint Cross actually does a lot of damage, and it's just holy range damage in an area of effect. So that's kind of fun. I get access to Holy Blade, but Holy Blade sucks in this game. So it's really just an auto attack that does holy damage, which is, and it costs 22 MP to use it. Like even with half MP, every other turn is the best you're gonna get out of it, which that's bad. And then they have like an AOE banish undead skill, which is useful, but not in every fight. Yeah, the problem I have with Paladin is that none of those things are good. They're like okay, and they're nice to have when the situations come up where you need them, but for the most part, it's not great. And so most of the time, your paladins are mostly just being used for defense stat growths because paladins have good defense path stat growths. They have the highest defense, I think, with 11, and they have 9 resistance growth, and they have decent HP growth. So they have good stuff. And then the only other thing that I consider good about Paladin is that they have access to Reflex as a reaction ability. And Reflex, in my opinion, is one of the better reaction abilities because just being able to not take damage from auto attacks is nice. But yeah, I don't see enough out of them, and honestly, they end up being secondary classes most of the time to Parivir. Which like that alone kind of makes me want to put it in B tier. But the thing is, you can main paladins and have like a different secondary that makes them good. Mostly they're in A tier because they synergize with the other human classes decently well. Because again, having access to nurse, having access to cover, having access to like that they have a skill that raises both their defense and resistance is, I mean, it's good, and you can use it in conjunction with Parivir to good effect. You can even use it in conjunction with like Ninja or like even Fighter, pretty good. But yeah, they're not quite S tier. They're missing some very essential things, and I honestly would rather have a sniper over a paladin, because yes, there are some missions where it seems like cover is required to win, But if you have a Parivir with Ninja Tabby, you're usually fine. Because you could, in one turn, go across the map and one-shot whatever is threatening you. So, yeah. Fencer. Okay, that is D tier. Viera Fencer is a tragedy, in my opinion. The only thing they have for them is they have the highest HP growth and they have 10 attack growth, which is good for melee, like if you're trying to build a melee Viera. However, the problem is that Sniper has 11 attack growth. So the only like physical damage Viera that where their physical stat actually kind of matters is Sniper, in my opinion, because like you're not playing Spellblade as we've gone over, and all the other Viera class are mage focused, except for maybe Assassin, but Assassin kind of does something else entirely, and you're not playing Archer. So the only job class that really cares about physical stats is Sniper, and their attack growth is better than Fencer. So you'd only really put a couple levels in Fencer so you get more HP. In my opinion, if you're playing Sniper as your main class, HP doesn't matter that much because you shouldn't be taking hits that often anyway. So Fencer ends up being like a decent growths class that unfortunately gets outshined by the only other class that needs physical stat. So like that's like the biggest argument people have for Fencer is that it's like, oh, it's your physical growth class, but Sniper just kind of does it better. The only like thing I could see is if for whatever reason you want to main a Spellblade as like your primary class, then yes, you would probably want to put some levels into Fencer instead, but even then like and yeah, apart from that, Fencer just have really awful skills. They're just so forgettable, and they do essentially nothing. The only thing I think is that they have access to. Oh, they apparently they don't. Oh, I thought they had access to like immobilization, but they don't. They have access to Doom. Oh, they do have access to a skill that does damage and lowers speed, and that is good. Lowering speed is specifically useful against boss fights because typically bosses are immune to debuffs. Or when I say debuffs, I mean like overhead debuffs, but they are not immune to like stat lowers. So any skill that does damage and lowers speed is specifically really good against bosses. So that is something. However, I'm pretty sure that all of Fencer skills require a bladed weapon to use. So you can't even put like Fencer skills on a Sniper and get like the attack and lower speed at range. Which is unfortunate because there is a combo later that can do that. We'll talk about once we start talking about the Gria classes. Well, not this one that's coming up, but yeah, Fencer's just unfortunate because you know, it's the class that Viera start out with, but it just gets outshined in every way by every other Viera job, so D tier. Next we have Geomancer. Gria Geomancer. The only thing that Geomancer has going for it is that it has the best defense growths out of any job in the entire game, with plus 11 defense and plus 11 resist. So, when you're making your Ravager Gria, you're going to be dumping a few levels of Geomancer into your Ravager. However, that's the only real thing that Geomancer has going for it. It is good enough that alone, their stat growth, to put them up into C tier, but when it comes to their skills and stuff, I would almost put them into never use. The problem with Geomancer is that their skills are dependent on either the weather or which tile your unit is standing on. when you cast the ability. And there are some maps where you don't get any tiles to cast your abilities from. So it's Geomancer is dependent on RNG, it seems like, on whether or not you even get to be able to use them on that map. There's nothing else I can really say about it. It's not good. It should be in D tier. It should be, because like it's just unusable most of the time. I probably wouldn't put it into never use, even though I joked about it. I wouldn't put it into never use because its skills don't actively harm it, and you could still like put a secondary on it. But yeah, it's only in C tier because its defense growths are good enough. And also, another problem with Geomancer is that all of its skills are based on your magic stat, and the best magic growth you get is from Raptor class, which is only +8 anyway. Gria have awful, awful, awful magic growths. So you're not going to be doing damage with Geomancer, even in the situations where you can use their skills. Just don't use this class unless you're using it for stats. You know what? I am going to put it in D. Because there's no situations where I'd be like, yeah, we can use Geomancer in this fight. Like, when have you ever sat down and been like, you would really slap in this fight? A Geomancer. Never. You'll never ever do that, so. Yeah. Next we have Ninja. Okay, this might also be controversial. S tier. Especially if you're not one of those players who save scums their speed growths. Ninja is just, I don't know. I have a lot to say. I have to sort through my thoughts when it comes to Ninja. Let's just start with the simple fact that they're the class that learns dual wield. And dual wield is such a game changer when you're playing the game that like it single-handedly slingshots Ninja into, like, essentially every Hume will go through Ninja at some point, whether it's to get dual wield or it's to get speed on your Hume, because Ninja have the best speed growth out of any Hume class at 90%, which there's no other Hume class that comes even close to that. So if you want speed on your Humes, you're going to be playing Ninja. Which, of course, you want speed. You always want speed in this game. So Ninja also have inherently, like, I think it's 15 evasion stat. It might be 10. But just being a ninja, you have 10 evasion. And then if you put Shield Bearer on its support and you equip 2 Reverie Shields, you're at 50% evasion. If you equip a Ninja Garb and a Thief's Cap and a the like green tier earring, you are then at 85% evasion. So you can turn your ninja into an evasion tank. You probably don't want a shield bearer and wear 2 Reverie Shields because it makes your ninja offensively useless. So instead, what you could do is have dual wield and have 2 Rangetsu Denbus. And so what that turns your evasion stat, I think, so let's assume he has 10 evasion, just being a ninja. You have the green tier earring, that's 20%. The Ninja Garb, that's 35%. The Thief's Cap is 40. And 2 Rangetsu Denbus, I think, is 50 evasion. So you dual wield 2 Rangetsu Denbus, and you're at 50% evasion, which means, mathematically, you'll be taking 50% damage throughout the whole fight. And you'll be dodging, like, status effects and stuff. And you still have tons of damage because Rangetsu Denbu is a really strong katana, and you have dual wield. So you're doing double base physical damage whenever you attack with Ninja. So believe it or not, ninja on their own can actually carry. Like there are fights where you could field just a ninja with as much evasion as you could pump into it as possible with dual wield Regetsu Denbus, and you can win the fight on your own. It's not always the case, but it is there. And if that's not enough, in your opinion, to make them good, just being the class that gives dual wield, in my opinion, is enough to shoot them into S tier. They're not gonna be on the same playing field as like Parivir, but Ninja is still good. And another thing you could do, a silly build, is you can give them Turbo MP, and it turns their ninjutsu into something usable. It also, their ninjutsu have low magic damage skills that also have a chance to cause a debuff, and most of the ninja debuffs from their skills are pretty good. Um, so you could put some Black Mage levels into a Hume and then turn them into a ninja and give them Turbo MP. It's one of the few classes where giving them Turbo MP still allows you to cast their magic every single turn, because you go from 4 cost to 8 cost. And in this game you get 10 MP per turn. So essentially every turn you get to still be able to cast your ninjutsu skills. And I also believe that Turbo MP increases the likelihood of the debuffs happening. I don't quote me on that, but I believe that's the case. So you could have a ninja that's just throwing out like logs at people all day with Wood Veil and just immobilizing them constantly. That's also dealing like good chunks of damage. So ninja's also not like a one-trick pony either. They have so many different tools that you could play around, and they have dual wield. So yeah, my opinion, S tier for sure. Okay, now we have Moogle Time Mage. Moogle Time Mage is C tier, and honestly, I probably would want a Moogle Time Mage over a Fusilier. Moogles are rough when it comes to magic because they don't have MP. So Moogle Time Mages are rough because you don't have access to Hastiga turn 1. However, Moogle Time Mages are still usable. You can still spam haste with them, and that's enough to make them not D tier. They do have situations where you can use a Moogle Time Mage. Not that you would, but you can. And the biggest problem with Moogle Time Mage is that Juggler exists, and Juggler has Quicken. Time Mage also has Quicken, but it costs MP to use. Juggler has free Quicken. And for those who don't know, Quicken, you... Let's say your Juggler is taking its turn, right? And then like on your... At the top of the screen, it says like which units will go after your Juggler. So let's say your Juggler's taking a turn, and then it's like a Paladin that's taking a turn, then it's an enemy turn, then it's like your Master Monk. If you use Smile Toss, which gives Quicken, on your Master Monk, instead of it being your Juggler, Paladin, Monster, Master Monk, it'll be Juggler, Master Monk, Paladin, Monster. So it essentially moves up your turn order of the unit that you use Quicken on to the next unit that makes its move. And so Time Mage is typically good with using Quicken because, especially if you, like on a new Mou Time Mage, if you're using have MP, you can use Quicken every turn. But Jugglers have Quicken for free. It doesn't cost any mana to use it. So my point is that Jugglers are better at doing things that Moogle Time Mage should be doing. However, if you do want to shoot yourself in the foot and use a Moogle Time Mage, you can do it. They're still, like, not useless. So, they're in C tier. Speaking of Juggler, they are in A tier. A lot of people put them in S tier. Unfortunately, Jugglers only really do two things. Actually, if you listen to other people, they say they only do one thing, and that's throw out Smile Toss every turn. I disagree. Jugglers also have access to stop at range at like 60% efficacy. And ring toss is actually pretty good, believe it or not. There are some times where you don't want to quicken your units, or they're like too far away or something like that. And in those times, you can just throw out a ring toss, and it's like 60% chance to cause stop, which just removes the unit from the game essentially. So every now and then, your juggler can just take a unit out of the game entirely. Um, Actually, you know what? Yeah. However, the problem is that it's still only 60% efficiency. So if you get lucky, you could field just a Moogle Juggler on its own and you could still win the fight. However, units that are immune to stop, or like sometimes you just aren't landing your stop, is enough to make it so that you don't win the fight on its own. Um, yeah, unfortunately, Jugglers only provide Quicken and they only provide stop, and they have tons of speed on their speed growth, which is good because the more you get, the more turns you get out of your Juggler, the more you'll be able to use Smile Toss, which means the more your other units are getting turns. So yeah, Juggler have like 74% speed. So I mean, on paper you could just run Moogle Knight or Chocobo Knight and have their secondary be Juggler and just never mount Chocobo, and then you just have tons of speed from the Chocobo Knight, and then you still have Smile Toss. Um, you could do that, but I like Juggler has enough in their speed growth that it doesn't really matter too much. Um, And the other problem that is that Quicken on its own, while it is incredibly strong, it's not a game winner. You can play the game without Quicken and be totally fine. Um, and so yeah, I could see people putting it in S tier, but personally, it's not on its own enough to be an S tier. It's missing like damage options. If it had some way to do lots of damage, it would easily be S tier. But yeah. And let's move on to New Mou Time Mage. I was talking about Quicken. New Mou Time Mage essentially does the same thing that Juggler does, especially since it has access to half MP. You can Quicken every single turn. However, it also can Hastega. I think it's every turn. Let me check really quick. And being able to Hastega every single turn is probably even better than being able to Quicken every turn. Yeah. So with half MP, it's 8 cost Hastega every single turn. And that's really good. And also, they have access to a stop skill as well. So New Mou Time Mage is essentially the Moogle Juggler, but better. And there is something cool you could do with New Mou Time Mage and Juggler. If you field both of them, you can use Quicken from your Juggler on your New Mou. Your New Mou will take a turn. You can move your New Mou to somewhere that's still in range of your Moogle, and then have your Moogle or your New Mou use Quicken on your Moogle. And then your Moogle will get a turn again. And then you Smile Toss your New Mou. And then your New Mou will get a turn again. And then you Quicken on your Moogle. So you get this like combination of your Time Mage and your Moogle constantly taking turns, and nothing else getting a turn in the game. And because Quicken from your New Mou only costs 6 MP, you're actually gaining MP on your New Mou as you're doing this, as well as being able to traverse the entire map without anything else taking a turn. And even on maps where like there's a timer and stuff, Quicken does not advance those timers. The timer themselves are calculated as like a unit action, and as long as you're able to keep quickening units before the timer will never advance forward. So it's a really interesting cheese strat where you're gaining infinite MP on your New Mou, which means if you have like a Sage as its secondary options, you can Ultima every single turn. that new Mou gets a chance. And then also, you can traverse the entire map. So on like time-sensitive maps where you need to get across the map, or you need units to protect some other unit that's across the map, you could do that. But yeah, so it's really interesting. And then on top of all of that, Mou Time Mage also has access to stop. They also have access to undo, which there are situations where that comes up where it's just essentially a full heal on your units. You throw like your Master Monk in the middle of a crowd of units, it goes down to like 100 HP from 600. You use undo on it, and it's back up to full immediately. it even it only reverts HP and MP. So like if you get debuffed in that time, it won't fix the debuffs, but it does come up, which is kind of fun. So yeah, Mou Time Mages are insane, and they're in S tier as like the support S tier because of Hastiga and Quicken, but mostly because of Hastiga. So yeah, these units are incredible, especially paired with another unit that can have access to Quickens every single turn. And now we have Viking. Viking is a very hard-fought C tier. Their problem is that they're kind of like a magic class, but Seek have absolutely no magic growths anywhere from anything. Viking's thing is that they can learn Thunder, Thundar, and Thundaga. However, those abilities will never do damage ever. Seek's best magic stat growth is from Ranger, Lanista, and Viking at 7. It's just bad. They also have a water spell, but you have to be standing in water yourself to use it. So, big whoop. The only thing you're using your Viking for is for I think it's called Strong Arm, which allows you to steal armor. And there are good armors in this game that you want to be stealing from units, so that's the one thing that makes them C tier, is that you want Strong Arm. It's the only way for you to steal armor in the whole game, so you will want at least one Seek that has Viking abilities on it. Which is a little unfortunate, but it's the world we live in. Otherwise, like, Viking is D tier for sure. It's just so bad. All of its skills are unintuitive. They're still positive. They don't actively hurt you to use them, but it's just awful otherwise. So that's all I have to say about Viking. It's just a bad class that gives you access to one thing. Oh, apparently they have 11 resistance stat growth. So if you want to build a tanky Seek for whatever reason, like a tanky Lanista, you'll need to throw a few Viking levels into your Lanista. Okay, now we have Ranger. Ranger is S tier because of mirror items. The way items in this game, usually like you would use a potion on yourself and it would restore like 50 health. Ranger has access to mirror items, and what you could do is you could throw potions on the enemy and mirror the effect. So instead of restoring 50 health to whatever enemy you throw the potion on, you deal 50 damage. And that is guaranteed 50 damage no matter what. There is no like random RNG roll on the damage. It's guaranteed flat 50 damage. And Ranger have access to item lore as a support ability. And what item lore does is it doubles the effect of items that you use. So you can mirror items potion and guaranteed 100 damage on anything. X potion does 400 damage with item lore mirror items, which will one-shot most enemies until you hit late game. Yeah, Ranger is just like, before you get your one-shot Parivir going, it is your class that you're using to one-shot things. Another cool thing is you can mirror items Phoenix down, which have a high chance to just instantly kill things. That's fun when that happens. And then most people kind of end their evaluation of Ranger there. However, Ranger have some cool tools that you could still use outside of that. They have the ability to reveal traps, which is very, very useful. And they can also lay down traps themselves. And traps are good, in my opinion, because the way that traps work is that if you step on a trap and it activates, no matter what happens to you from the trap effect, you instantly lose the rest of your turn. So that translates to you not being able to make an action that turn. So what you can do is, like, let's say you're out of position and like your sniper is in the middle of some units that can attack them from behind. What you can do is you can have your ranger place a trap on the tile behind them, and then when a unit goes in to try and back attack your sniper, they will step on the trap and lose their turn. And not only do they lose their turn, they're also in the way of your sniper unit being back attacked more from melee units. Um, the AI is kind of finicky on whether or not they will actually do that. um, yeah, it's not guaranteed that they do that. They tend to want to back attack your units, but sometimes they just don't. However, if you're like scared of your sniper unit being back attacked by something, just throw a trap behind them. And then if the case does happens where the AI decides, hey, I'm going to try and back attack your sniper, they just lose their turn. And they protect your sniper at the same time. So it's, yeah, traps are not reliable. However, they are something that you can use from time to time, and you do get good effects out of it. You do get good value out of it. But Ranger's mostly in S tier because you can one-shot people with Mirror X items. And yeah, they can single-handedly win fights if you field just a Ranger. So, plus they're the class that you use items with. You can they're like one of the best class to have items with, and there are some cheat items in the game that give you just insane effects when you use them. So having a unit that have access to items all the time is pretty good. So, okay. With that said, next we have Dragoon. Dragoon is C tier. They're pretty bad. Unfortunately, I really like Dragoon as a concept, but the problem is that their breath spells are based on magic stat, and Banga aren't really good with magic. I mean, they do have classes that give them magic level up, but if you're playing Dragoon to use breath spells, you're playing Dragoon wrong. If like this class would be so much better if their breath skills just scaled on the physical stat. It would be so much better, but it doesn't, and it's such a shame. This class gimmick is that they can use jump, which I think it's like 2.5 times your auto attack damage, I think. But it comes at the caveat of it being like 50% chance to land. So if you accuracy up buff this thing, it's good, but the fact that you have to accuracy up buff to get that kind of damage when you could just play something like a Parivir, which does something similar, but you don't need accuracy up, like you don't need help from another class, it's rough. The only other thing Dragoons are good for is killing dragons easily. They have a skill that does like 2 or 3 times damage to dragons or something like that. But it's not like the game is flooded with dragons. They come up so rarely that, you know, your other classes could just deal with it without needing a Dragoon anyway. So it's unfortunate. They have some cool stuff. It's just that it all sucks. Their breath skills don't do a lot of damage. They don't scale with physical, and their jump skill is a hit or miss. And there's that. Not much else I can really say about them. Templar. Okay, Templar is B tier. They have really good skills. They have really good skills if you can combine it with a different class and their skills. They have access to haste, which is like one of the few ways you can get haste that isn't a time mage. It's just level 1 haste though, so it's still kind of eh. They have access to discipline, which is a self attack buff, which is really good in combination with another class. They have access to Astra, which is pretty good. It makes you immune to debuffs for 1 time. Yeah, so like those things are good if you can use it on another class that can make use of it. The problem with Templar is that they're the slowest unit in the game. And their movement range is only 3 tiles. So not only are they really slow, they also don't move very fast or very far. Their stack rolls are pretty decent. 9 attack, 10 defense is alright. But typically if you want to like level up tank stats, you're going to be doing defender and bishop. But so you're not really using Templar to level up. You can, but there's just other ways or other jobs you would want to level up instead. And you're not really using it as a main class because it's super slow and it only has 3 move range, which you can offset with Tabby, but that's still only 5. You'd rather have 6 move range if you're using Tabby. The cool thing about Templars, they have access to spears, which allow you to hit 2 tiles when you melee attack instead of just the one in front of you. It's a bit of a double-edged sword though, because if you have an enemy and like your ally unit is behind them, which does happen a lot because you back attack tons, your spear will hit the enemy and your ally. But in that case, you would just be like 1 tile further away when you go to spear them. That way you would hit like an empty tile and then the enemy that's on the second tile. So spears are interesting because occasionally you can get 2 hits with your auto attack. However, if you're just auto attacking for base damage, even like if you're doing attack buffs and stuff, it's not really that good. The auto attack command is not good enough on its own. You would want something to offset that, whether you have like dual wield or you have like Parivir's flare skills, which are essentially an auto attack, but they have double damage and they have element or whatever. We'll get to that. But anyways, all of this is to say that Templar has good skills, but as a class on its own, you don't want to play as. You would rather have like a Bonga main class something else, and then have Templar as its secondary skills, which, I mean, that's what the B tier is for, so here we are. Moogle Black Mage is D tier. Very simply, Moogles don't have access to half MP, and because of that, Black Mage is bad. So, there you go, D tier. There's not much else I could say. I mean, it does give Moogles access to Geomancy, which again, you can use in combination with Fusilier to blah 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 blah, but Moogle Black Mage is just bad. There's not much else I could say about it. Okay, Green Mage. Green Mage is S tier. It might, if Parivir didn't exist, this would be the best class in the game. Green Mage are the only source of accuracy buff in the game. They have a skill called Trank, which gives plus accuracy to whatever unit that buffs or gets buffed by it. It's single target. However, Viera have access to double cast, which we'll get to later. So you could double cast Trank. You can get two of your units to have plus accuracy in the same turn. Especially, you're going to be using half MP in combination with this, so that you can double Trank. And yeah, the accuracy up buff single-handedly enables so many strategies. I mean, we were talking about earlier how jump is like 50% accurate. We're talking about how ring toss is 60% accurate. You know, stuff like this. If you trank your Juggler, your ring toss will always land. If you trank your jump or your Dragoon, your jump will always land. Like, this class single-handedly makes other classes viable. So it's like the support of all supports. And then on top of that, Green Mage also have access to sleep. So you can trank yourself, and then your sleep will always land. Normally it's like 60% chance, but you trank yourself, and then you can sleep. And then because I was talking about double cast earlier, turn 1, you can trank yourself and sleep. And turn 1, you can just remove a group of units from the game immediately. And then there's one other thing that doesn't get talked about very often, that I think is a huge, just like oversight. Like the other YouTubers, they didn't mention it. This class also has access to a skill called Leap. Okay, and Leap provides plus movement and jump. So the way movement works in the game is that you'll never have baseline a unit that has higher than 4 movement or lower than 3 movement. Except for, like, if you're fighting a Tonberry, they only have 2 movement. But that's, you know, that's a whole different other thing. So most classes only have 3 or 4 unit. Same with enemies. So, on paper, enemies could just, like, especially ranged units, could just attack you and then move 4 tiles away, and you'll never catch up to them. However, the maps are not infinite. They'll eventually run into walls and stuff, so... But there are ways to offset that. There's an item in the game called Ninja Tabby, which gives you +2 movement. And there is this leap skill, which gives you +1 movement and increased jump stat. So, we'll get to it in a second, because Parivir is right here. One of the biggest downsides to Parivir is that all of their damage has to happen in melee range. And so you have to be able to catch up to units. Which is why Parivir are one of the best users of the Ninja Tabby. But another thing you could do is have your Green Mage use Leap on your Parivir. Suddenly your Parivir goes from being able to move 4 tiles in that turn to 7. Which is almost double your base movement range. And on most maps, that's like half the map. And on top of that, you have increased jump stats. So the maps that have lots of differences in verticality are no problem to you either. Because you have just such an insane jump stat. The Ninja Tabby also give you increased jump as well. So the downside of Parivir requiring to be in melee range to do their huge big dick damage immediately gets negated by this leap skill. So it's very, very underrated. It doesn't get talked about. It's a sleeper thing, because most people are like, oh, it trank all day long on your Green Mage. It's like, yes, that's good, but they also have this leap skill that, like, I don't know. I find myself using it all the time, and it's a lot of fun being able to just throw your Parivir halfway down the map, instantly killing things. Like, and then Green Mage also has access to Protect and Shell and Blind and Oil, one of the other classes that gives access to Oil. So they do have other, like, niche options too, if you really want it. But yeah, most of the time your Green Mage is just going to be double casting Trank on everything, and then once you've given accuracy up to all your units, you could start sleeping stuff instead. Yeah, probably the best support class in the entire game. And it would be probably the best job in the whole game, if not for Parivir, which we're going to get to right now. So Parivir is the best class in the game by a long shot. Very simply, their skills are broken. Like, broken. Their skills are double your auto attack damage, and they come with an element, and they also have a chance to cause debuffs, and the debuffs are like crippling ones. Like, one of their debuffs is Doom, one of their debuffs is Immobilize, one of them is Confuse, another one's Slow, one of them's Berserk, but Berserk is kind of a nothing burger. So it's just baseline double your auto attack damage. If you hit them from behind with these skills, it also applies back attack damage. So it's ×4 your auto attack damage. And then if you give them the Geomancy support skill, you also hit for weakness on anything that doesn't absorb the or resist the element. So you're doing like 8 times damage on Parivir, and also their skills scale with physical attack. And Parivir have the best physical stat growth on Humes, and they have decent speed at 62%. And their HP is alright. The only like bad thing about Parivir stat growth is their resist is only 5, which is one of the lowest stat growths out of any stat in the whole game. So but my point is that Parivir one-shot things, and it's so good at doing that anything that isn't the attack and speed of the Parivir doesn't matter on their stat growth. The only other downside to Parivir is they don't have access to good range skills. They do have one skill that hits 3-tile range, but again, if you're using Ninja Tabby and you have Leap on it, you're just never using that. And then if you really do want range, you could give it something like a fighter skills or something, so you have Aura Blast. But yeah, Parivir are just crazy units. They do so much damage that like you're just one-shotting everything, dude. Even the final boss, it gets to the point where you're like one-shotting them with Parivir. Yeah, I there's not much else I could say that hasn't been said about them already. And like I said, like their downside is that they're mostly melee range units, but that could be offset by just pumping them full of movement buffs and stuff. So yeah, they're good. Next we have Berserker. Berserker is C tier. As much as I'm loath to say it, they do still have use. The biggest argument people have against Berserker is that they're reliant on their buffs. They have hold on, let me look. Berserker have access to evasion up with intercom, which turns them kind of into an evasion tank. However, they can't equip shields, so you'd basically have to do like a Ninja Tabby, the green tier earring, and your evasion buff, and even then you're like at 60. No, you're not at 60. You're at like 50% evasion. And so the reason why it's bad is because people tend to think that buffs are bad in this game because there's a lot of cleanse. No, there isn't. There isn't a lot of cleanse in this game. Buffs are actually good. There are a few fights where there are werewolves and there's going to be roar, in which case you can't have buffs during that fight. However, they're not that common. Like, we're talking maybe 5% of all fights in the entire game have werewolves in them that allow them to use roar. We're talking like 10% of all fights ever in which there's any cleanse or dispel present at all. It's actually kind of rare. There are a lot of fights where you'll be able to freely buff and not have to worry about it. And even in those fights where there are werewolves, where there is roar, where there is cleanse, you can just focus them and kill them first. In which case, after that, your buffs are fine to be used. I really like buffs in this game, and units that rely on their buffs, like this class, can increase their own critical hit and stuff like that. They're fine. Yeah. The other cool thing about Berserker is I believe they're the only class that can destroy helmets. And there are situations where like you'll want to debuff an enemy. Like, let's say you're trying to steal like their accessory or something. You'll want to stop them or something so you can steal from them without any accuracy penalty. But they're like wearing a ribbon. It's not very often, but like there's 2 or 3 fights where they're wearing a ribbon and they're immune to debuffs because of it, where you'll want to destroy their helmet so that you can inflict the stop status on them, so that you can steal whatever it is you're trying to steal from them. So, and like just in general, like helmets aren't really too big of a deal. It's mostly the armor that you'd want to destroy if you are destroying stuff. However, there are some times where destroying the helmet's good too, and I believe this is the only class that destroys helmets. So that's good. Oh, they can also destroy accessories. You would want to steal accessories, but they can destroy them too. Which there are some times where being able to destroy an opponent's ninja tabby that you aren't able to steal off them is pretty decent. But the reason why this class isn't any higher is because other than that, like even including those skills that I talked about, they're situational at best. At best, they're situational. Um, the the only thing Berserker really has going for them is that they have 11 attack stat growth. Everything else sucks in their growth though, so if you're using them to train attack, you're pumping like maybe a couple level, like 5 or 10 at most, and then you're switching to like Lanista, so you have a better defense stat growth. They also have the lowest speed stat growth out of all the Seek. So yeah, the Berserkers are situational at best. So that's why they're in C tier. Okay, Assassins. Yes, okay. Assassins. In my opinion, they're S tier. They are a debuff class. They have access to stop, which is at the same accuracy as jugglers. They have access to concentration as a support skill so that their debuffs can land and you don't even need to accuracy buff them. They have access to an instant kill move on anything that doesn't resist it, which again, if you have concentration, it'll land more often. And they have access to an Ultima skill. So you can, Viera does have access to have MP, and so Assassin has Ultima. Typically speaking, Ultima on Assassin is bad. You would much rather like be like a summoner or like some high magic class, damage class with Ultima, or you'd rather have like sniper with the assassin skill so that you can Ultima at range. The fact that assassins have access to Ultima at all is good. It just means that if you're running Have MP, every other turn you can hit Ultima with this thing. The other thing that's really good about assassins is their growths are really good. Assassins have the best speed growth out of any unit that isn't Chocobo Knight at 60 or at 96%, which is only 3% less than Chocobo Knight. And they also have 8 attack, which isn't like phenomenal, but it is something, and they do have 7 magic, and like their tank stats are kind of lackluster, but 96% speed is a lot. It's the class you're going to be using to level speed. I mean, Viera don't really need it that much. Like Green Mage is at 86, which is a really close second. But my point is that assassins are really fast, which matters because they're your debuff unit. The more turns you can get on assassin, the better, which means more chances to cause your debuff. It's more chances to cause stop or instant KO, or use Ultima. And that's all you really need them for. You don't really need them for anything else. And their low tank stats are kind of annoying because you would want a little bit of survivability because you tend to be right in the middle of enemy units when you're using assassin. But they also have access to a sleep skill that also has a chance to doom them. So if you're able to sleep and doom them, they're just dead. It's probably your best unit for just like killing units or removing them from the game that don't do damage, which is kind of fun because there are some times where like doing physical or magic damage is such a pain in the ass, but being able to stop a unit or like instantly kill them with the sleep doom thing is like an actually good strategy. And there's a lot of times where you can field assassin by themselves, especially if you have the green mage as their second action skill, and they can win fights on their own, which is a thing for S tier. So you can start the fight, you can trank yourself, and then from then on, all your stops land, all of your sleeps and dooms land, your instant KO move lands. Yeah, this unit on its own can win fights, so it's S tier. I think putting it lower than S tier is criminal. I think people who are like, oh, it's A tier, I could understand why it's S tier, blah, blah, blah. No, it's S tier. It's just a really strong class. And again, they also have access to concentration, so you don't even really need the accuracy up buff from Green Mage. You could run something else on this thing. It's just so good. Yeah, that's about all I have to say about that, I think. Again, their stack rows aren't phenomenal. Like, you'll get more attack from Fencer or Sniper. You'll get more tank stats out of Spellblade because they're 7/7. I mean, Viera already don't have good tank stats. Their highest is +7 defense, +8 resist. So it's not phenomenal, but if you want them to survive longer, you could just level a few levels in Defensor so you can get the 8 HP. But yeah, no, they're just really good units that are slept on for sure. But yeah, so next we have Lanista. Lanista for me is B tier. They could be A tier. The guy I was watching, which I mentioned before, Cruza Complex, I get the vibe that he doesn't like Lanistas. But his like argument for it was that the unit skills are too expensive, and because he's so afraid of roar and cleanse that like the buffs that the class provides don't stick. um First of all, yes, Seek don't have access to have MP, but there are only two of the 8 skills that Lanista have that cost more than 10 MP. Okay, one of them is a drain skill at 12 MP cost, and drain skills tend to be pretty good, so being 12 MP is fine in my opinion. And the other one being an area of effect drain skill at 24 MP. So you're waiting 3 turns at most in order to get their best skill, which is an AoE drain skill. Typically, that would be pretty bad. However, Lanista also have access to a MP drain skill, which you will require enemies to not be using their MP to make the most amount out of it. But you can turn 1 steal MP, and then theoretically on turn 2 have enough MP to cast your AoE drain skill. So this class is actually pretty good at survivability. You find that they survive a lot more stuff. They also have good ranged options. They have a skill called Haunting Vision, which does ranged auto attack damage, but has a chance to blind the target. They have access to Strike, which is an AoE increase of critical hit chance, which is like a Berserker's critical hit thing, but instead you cast it as if you would cast like fire or something. And they have access to AoE defense increase. This class is actually really good as like a frontline fighter. They also have access to Dragonheart, which Dragonheart is if you take any source of damage, you get 1 activation of re-raise, and if it gets cleansed, like you won't get it again, but that's fine. Like I said, cleanse doesn't show up that often, and even if it does, you can focus the units that do have cleanse or roar or whatever. But yeah, as a unit that, like, especially if you build this guy tank or something, as a unit, like, I would not be mad to have a Lanista on my team. They are actually pretty decent. and I think it's kind of criminal to put them lower than B tier, because their skills are also pretty good in combination of like a ranger. The drain stuff on a ranger is really good. Like a ranger doesn't have MP. I'm pretty sure they don't have MP costs. They might do for their traps. Let me look really quickly. Yeah, ranger, their skills don't cost MP, so you're fine to save all your MP from the ranger skills for Lanista. Save up to have your Razzle Dazzle, which is your AoE drain for 24 MP, and then just use that. Rangers also will probably be using items, so you could give yourself MP or something like that. Like, this is a good secondary option for your Seek, the Lanista skills. And I honestly, I think it's kind of criminal to think of this class as bad. They're not amazing. They're not like A tier. They have a lot of things that they don't do. Like their one range skill, I think, is single target. Um, Single target for damage and blind is not like obviously it's good, but it's not crazy. They don't provide like any physical damage amp at all, which is kind of rough. Like they don't have a double attack of any sort. They don't have like skills that do ×2 physical damage or whatever, which is a little rough. So they end up being more of a tank class than anything else, mostly because of their insane survivability. So that's why they're not any higher than B tier. Okay, next we have Ravager. Where did I put them? I put Ravager in S tier. I have lots of S tiers, but I think I only have one more that I put in S tier. So we're almost out of the S tier stuff already. Ravager is S tier purely because of sneak attack. What sneak attack does, normally when you attack units from behind, it's ×2 your physical damage. Sneak attack changes that to ×4. Gria have a trait that's unique to their race where they have infinite jump stat. They can jump over anything. They can jump up any amount of height. So their movement range doesn't matter too much because, like, typically if you're trying to do back attacks, like if you have 3 movement, like a Templar, you'll never be able to do back attacks unless like the AI does something stupid. Typically you have to always move around units. And even then, sometimes the terrain is like a pain in the ass. Gria don't have that. They could just fly over top of something, and they're basically always guaranteed to be attacking from behind. So that single-handedly makes it so that like your sneak attack is always active. And so this class ends up being capable of one-shotting things most of the time, especially if you find ways to give plus attack. Like the Hunter class has access to plus attack support skill. So you end up like shitting out damage on this thing a lot and reliably. And then even if you're not able to sneak attack every time, you have access to other skills that are pretty good. Like overpower. Overpower is like if you're afraid of counters, you don't have to worry about reaction abilities. Blast wave is your long range stuff. They also have a skill where the more debuffs enemies have, the more damage it deals. And as you could tell, I kind of love my debuffs. So if you have an assassin running around doing assassin things, if you manage to use stop on your juggler, later on we'll talk about Trickster. If you manage to get some Trickster stuff going, like this class is really, really good. And on top of that, they also have good growth. They have the best attack growth at 10 out of the Gria classes. They also have 9 defense, which is really good. They only have 6 resist, but you could put a couple levels of Geomancer in there to keep your resist up. And 50% speed growth is the lowest out of Gria, but that's not like the worst thing ever. You could still, have a few levels in Hunter so that you can get your speed up. This class is just really quite surprising how strong it is. And it's an S tier because you can field this thing and it will on its own be able to win a few fights. There are some where it won't. It kind of gets overwhelmed really quickly, like especially if your sneak attack just isn't enough to one shot, which does come up. Um, when that happens, you can kind of get overwhelmed really easily. But most of the time, you can feel this thing on its own, and it'll be able to solo the encounters. And then on top of that, you can give it the Raptor as its secondary. And on situations where like you can't sneak attack or whatever, you can instead speed down them with damage. So I mean, we'll get to that a little bit later when I come across Raptor. I'm gonna put it near Hunter because I have something I need to say about both of them. But yeah, this class is a really strong class. It's tanky. You can build them tanky. It's just super reliable, and yeah, there's not much else I can really say about that. It ends up being like pretty similar to Master Monk, on in terms of its damage output, and we have Master Monk in S. So, and then we already have the last S tier class, and that's Cannoneer. Cannoneer's in here, similar to how Time Mage is in here. Entirely different skills, but it's in here because it's one of the best support classes in the game, purely because of Ether Shell. Ether Shell is plus 60 mana to anything that you use it on. And there are a lot of units, like let's say you're using Assassin with concentration, well, your Ultima is going to cost 32 MP. Well, that could get offset by just Ether Shelling it with your Cannoneer. And then you have 60 mana, so you have 2 turns in a row guaranteed where you can use Ultima on Assassin. Turn 1 in the game. Like, it's so much. It is the enabler for other classes, which is actually more similar to Green Mage in that sense. Green Mage enables inaccurate skills to be reliably used. Cannoneer allows expensive spells to be reliably used. My point is that they're, especially the Ultima skills, which we'll get to a little, like when I talk about Sage and whatever, and like Illusionist, that cost a lot of mana. And being able to just pump your units full of MP so that they can use those skills is just insanely good. Like we talk about how Moogles don't have MP. Moogle Time Mage becomes usable with a Cannoneer on your team because you just Ether Shell them and then suddenly you can use Hastiga and all the good stuff that Time Mages have. It sucks to do that because you could just use New Mou Time Mage and you won't even need to Ether Shell them, but yeah, there's just some classes that like they're good on their own, and then being able to be ether shelled to increase their MP is even better. Like Lanista, for example. If you are using Lanista, they're like the perfect target for being ether shelled so that they can use their AoE drain spell all the time. You could throw them right in the middle of stuff, have them be absolutely swarmed by enemies, and then you're constantly draining all your health back, and then you just constantly be ether shelling them. That's the other thing about this unit, is that it has basically the entire map arranged on its weapons. So you can ether shell people across the map. You could attack things from across the map. That's another thing. Cannoneer have some gimmicks that make them really powerful too, and it almost allows them to solo encounters too. Encounters where there isn't cleanse. Their damage is entirely dependent on being able to use and keep buffs. But, for example, I was talking about how Templar is a really good secondary to something else. Cannoneer loves the Templar skills. Cannoneer have a skill called Prime, which makes it so that their next basic attack does double damage. Usually that's like, oh, big whoop, you know, your next attack does double damage. Why wouldn't you just attack twice? It's very similar to Focus. The only difference is that Cannoneer also have a skill called Target, which allows you to auto attack without consuming your Prime buff. What it does is that you target an enemy, and then the next time the Cannoneer moves, it auto attacks. It uses the effect of Prime, but it doesn't get rid of the buff. So essentially, you can have double damage on all your auto attacks from that point onward after you prime. The only downside is that it can be cleansed. So, and it's not just prime. You get a couple other things. There's buckshot, which you can give yourself, and it'll increase the range of your attack. So if you target an enemy and they're beside like another unit, the next time you take a turn, you'll buckshot, and it does AoE on your auto attack. Another cool thing is you could start spamming Quicken on this guy too, as long as you keep targeting, and you just end up doing tons of damage that way. If you use Templar's Discipline skill, which increases your attack, that also adds to your prime buff. If you use the plus attack support skill from Templar, that also adds to your attack. Like, this thing can just absolutely shit out damage too, and they are really good at boss killing. But you're mainly using this guy to ether shell your units, and then after you're done ether shelling, it still has access to tons of damage. This class is just insanely good. And it's almost required for some things. Like, if half MP didn't exist, if blood price didn't exist, this class would be absolutely required to beat the game, and it would be the best class in the game, just because of Ether Shell. It's so good, so good. I love this class to bits. Next we have Trickster, which is A tier. This class is super gimmicky. Banga don't really have access to good magic. They're not really a magic race, which is kind of a surprise when you look at Trickster's growths and you see it has 10 magic and 88 speed, which is by far Banga's highest speed growth. The close second being Master Monk at 71%. So Tricksters end up being really fast and have tons of magic stat. However, Tricksters themselves don't have any skills that use their magic stat. It's random, man. It's so random. Tricksters are a debuff class. They're like similar to assassins. The only difference being that, oh yeah, by the way, when I was talking about assassins can equip bows, which means their ultima can be at range. Their skills can be at range. Anyways, Tricksters have debuffs. Their range is like magic range. It's not based on their equipment range, which is kind of sad. But yeah, they're a debuff class. So you want to give them an accuracy buff, and then they can poison stuff, they can immobilize stuff, they can charm stuff, which is, in my opinion, better than the Moogle's charm stuff. And they can... Don't they have a thing that can turn... Oh yeah, they can inflict frog, okay? So if you start debuffing stuff with your Trickster, which you're probably not going to be doing, but if you do start doing that, you instantly start turning on the Ravager ability that does more damage based on how many debuffs the opponent has. So yeah, this class, you're probably not using it for debuffs, which I'll get to in a second, but it does have those options. And I love me some debuffs, man. I do. I love being able to spam Trank and just debuff the crap out of everything. The last skill this thing has that is kind of actually useful is it has Mug, which allows you to steal loot. And I'm pretty sure it's random which level loot you get. So you can just stop something, pull up your Trickster, and just start stealing all the loot off of things. So if you're trying to loot grind, you can use Trickster, which is just a nice little quirk, I guess, to have. But the big thing you're using Trickster for is you have its secondary abilities be Gladiator skills. Gladiator has access to a fire, ice, and thunder attack that is based on your magic stat. And Gladiator also have access to Ultima, which is based on your magic stat. And Banga can use Have MP. Bishop can grant Have MP. So you have a 16 MP cost Ultima, so you can use it every other turn on a class that has 10 magic growth and 88% speed. And the last thing about Trickster that makes them really good is that they have cards as their weapon. And cards have the longest range out of any weapon in the game. They can hit basically the whole map. And the Ultima from the Gladiator skill, and I'm pretty sure the Fire, Ice, and Thunder attack from the Gladiator skills hit at weapon range. So you can Ultima stuff across the map every other turn with this class, and it does, like, it makes use of the magic stat. So Tricksters end up being just crazy units. This is one of the few times where I could see people wanting to put it in S tier, but the reason why I don't put it in S tier is that on its own, it's still only Ultima every other turn, and even with high magic growth, it's still not enough to one-shot things some of the time. So Trickster can get overwhelmed very easily on maps, and it's actually a little difficult to find situations where they can solo stuff. And they need green mages. They absolutely require Gladiator as their secondary ability. On their own, they're kind of bad. They don't have any plus attack in cards. Like, yeah, sure, their range is amazing, but like with only 7 attack growth, which is on the lower end for Banga, your cards aren't going to be doing that much damage. And without Green Mage, like, your debuffs aren't going to be landing that reliably either. And I'm pretty sure Banga don't have access to concentration either. So there's a lot of things that kind of hold Trickster back, in my opinion, from being S tier. But don't get me wrong, the ranged Gladiator stuff is incredible. And I definitely, like, I always have a Trickster Gladiator combo in my team. I'm not always using it, but it's definitely always there. And like I said before, I like to grind for loot on my enemies because I like being able to make as many ninja tabby as possible. So any class that have access to like limitless looting with like mug or pillage or whatever is good in my opinion. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that. Okay, so now we have another shitty class. Never use Flintlock ever. Never use it. Flintlock sucks, man. It wishes it was Cannoneer. If Flintlock just had the same premise where like you could just Ether Shell every turn and pump units full of mana, obviously this would be an S tier as well. However, the problem with Flintlock is that you're not able to use any of its abilities until you use Prime first. You have to use Prime first, and then you can use its other abilities. So any action you want to take, any ability you want to take, it minimum requires 2 actions. So instantly, this unit has half the amount of turns that every other job has in the entire game. And then, okay, icing on the cake, the Prime can be cleansed. So you spend your first turn cleansing, Werewolf roars, you take the first turn priming, Werewolf roars, you have to do it again, and you still haven't made an impactful action in the game. Okay, Flintlock does have access to Ether Shell. So, essentially you end up with like an Ether Shell that's half as efficient as the Cannoneer's Ether Shell. So it's like a 30 MP, instead of 60. It's just bad, man. My criteria for I never use is that it has to be a class that actively hurts you, and that's what this class does. It actively hurts you by having the amount of actions you get on this unit. And then on top of that, it doesn't, like, every time you use your action, you use the prime status. It's the same for Cannoneer, but like Flintlock doesn't have a targeting skill that allows you to not use your prime. So, like, this unit is bad. It's just, don't use it. If you put Flintlock in any tier higher than never use it ever, you are stupid. I'm sorry. Coffee potato, I'm sorry, but like, I think we played different games, you and I. Flintlock does not belong in B or A or whatever tier you put it in. You just don't use it. I didn't mean to hate, but like, come on, dude, are you serious? Yes. Okay. So human archers, they're C tier. They have access to focus, but again, focus isn't really that big a deal on its own because you could just attack twice instead. And I don't think humans have like, if you dual wield, like if you focus and then you have like a unit that has dual wield, it'll work for both attacks on your dual wield attack. So that's something you could do that. The reason why. Wait, did we talk about Viera Archers already? Oh no, we didn't. It's not bad enough to be in D tier. They do still have some things that you can use that are situationally good. They have the earliest access to the burial ability so that you can banish undead, which is good. They have access to a blind, which is like, it doesn't do damage first, so it's kind of bad, but they also have access to immobilize and disable. Again, it's not damage and the ability to inflict the debuff, it's just inflict the debuff. It also has a charm. So this unit does really well with the plus accuracy buff. You can just start like disabling targets so that they can't make actions on you anymore, and makes them essentially useless. This class also has access to the concentration support ability, which is pretty good. It means that you won't need to rely on green mage as much in order to get your debuffs off. So it's like it's a debuff class that has the problem of it not doing damage when it debuffs. And it doesn't have quite the same kind of breadth as like assassin or trickster, in that like it doesn't have, it's only immobilize, disable, or charm, or blind, I guess. And like you're essentially never going to be using mobilize. You're going to only be using disable, or you're only going to be using charm. But like, it is a debuff class. It is good. Unfortunately, that's the only thing it does. Whereas Trickster has other stuff it does. You know, Assassin has other stuff it does. If it had damage plus debuffs, or it did more than just debuffs, it would be way better. But as it is now, it's only situationally good. But yeah, I do like archers. I do respect them. I just don't think that they're as good as or like, I don't think they're as bad as people make them out to be, but I don't think that they're good enough to be in B. Like, even as secondary actions, most of the time you'd rather have a different class's secondary actions, right? So in the end, you would probably end up wanting to main like Archer, but yeah, as like a class on its own, it's not enough. Yes, I think that's all I really have to say about that. Next we have Mou Black Mage. They're B tier. The difference between them and Moogle is that they have access to have MP, and Black Mages don't really have a wide array. Like, they are very specific in the things that they do. And only having access to fire, ice, and thunder is not the greatest. There's a lot of things that can resist all three, or just some of them, or like, there's lots of fights where enemies will resist, like, one enemy will resist fire, one enemy will resist ice, and one enemy will resist thunder. And if they group together, then like, you have to, you know, you can't hit them all for full damage. So, but black mages are fine. Like, you can still use them in a pinch, and with have MP, you can raw spell every turn, and you can Gauss spell every other turn. Or I think you can even Gauss spell every turn with have MP. Yeah, it's only 18. So you can Gospel every other turn. Every turn with have MP, which is pretty good. It's just full Black Mage damage, and then Black Mages also have Geomancy. Less useful than Hume Geomancy. You're basically never in a situation where your new Mao want the Geomancy buff, whereas Parivir basically require it. So Hume Black Mage is better than new Mao Black Mage, but still, if you have to field units and you have a new Mao Black Mage, like, you're not going to be mad that you have a new Mao Black Mage, especially if it has have MP. So yeah, that's all I can really say about that. They also have good growths. 10 magic, 10 resist. Or no, that's not right. Let me scroll down. Numao has 11 magic, 10 resist. So if you're building your Numao to be magic, which you probably are, Black Mage is the best for doing that. And they also have 10 resist. Alchemist have 11 resist, so... And Time Mage also has 10 resist. So you know, you don't absolutely need Black Mage for resistance, but you know, it's still a decent class to level up as if you want. Again, it has the highest magic increases, so... But with only 46 speed, it's kind of rough. And it ends up being kind of frail too, with only 5 HP growth. But if you want like a good all-around Numao, you can level up some as Beastmaster to get 7 HP, 8 defense, and then lots of levels into Black Mage. So, yeah. Not much else I could say about that. They're kind of like the boring class. The boring magic class. This is Thief, right? Thief. D tier. Being able to steal accessories is fine. Being able to steal Ninja Tabby is really good. But the thing is you can also just grind for Ninja Tabby. You can do the Grazton, like you can reset the auction house by sleeping, and then you could just keep doing the Grazton auction house until you get Ninja Tabby. And so stealing accessories isn't that big of a deal. Early game, it's probably fine. Or I guess it would be mid game by the time you start seeing Ninja Tabby, but if you are good at grinding for loot, and if you are good at abusing the auction house, you don't need to steal accessories. So thieves end up being pretty mediocre. I mean, they're required if you're trying to do like loot stealing and stuff. But I'm trying to evaluate these units based on how impactful their actions are, and stealing is not impact. It's worse than auto attacking. So yeah, that's it. There's a lot. It doesn't matter what their stats are. They're just kind of shitty. Okay, Summoner. This is the last S tier. Summoner on its own can win fights. Purely because of Phoenix being able to party revive and also restore like half your total HP in one spell. The best use of have MP. This is the class that learns it for Viera. This is how you get have MP on Viera. So obviously really good because of that. All your summons with have MP can be cast every single turn. Kieran being basically a party-wide regen giver is amazing. Regen is really good. And again, cleanse is not that common. It's common, or like it's around, but it's like I'm talking 5% of all fights has like a roar in it, and like 10% of all fights have any form of cleanse in it. So yeah, Summoner are just really good. It has Carbuncle, which is a wall to basically all your units. They have the highest like damage range. All their summons are basically, I think, the same damage as tier 3 Black Mage spells. And like I talked about earlier, how Black Mage only has Fire, Ice, and Thunder. Summoner is really close to that. They have Fire, Ice, and Thunder. They have Ifrit, Ramu, and Shiva, which is Fire, Ice, and Thunder. But Summoner also have Maduin, which is Holy. And Holy is resisted by almost nothing. And the things that do resist Holy, they don't resist Ifrit, Ramu, or Shiva. So, yeah, Summoner has that fourth magical option that makes them way better than Black Mages. And then on top of that, I'm pretty sure Maduin also has more damage than the other 3 summons too. So you're essentially always spamming out Maduin. Although I think with Have MP, you still can only use it every other turn. So you will have to still be using, you will be using Ifrit, Ramu, and Shiva on the turns that you can't use Maduin because you don't have enough MP. But still, yeah, again, this class on its own can solo fights just because of the sheer amount of range that the spells have. Instead of it being like the little plus sign, the 5 tiles, it's another step up from that. So you end up being able to hit what is it, like no, it's 2 steps up from that. So you can hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You can hit 24 tiles with summoner magic spells, which is a ton. Like, you hit so many things. And then that's just on its own, okay? Earlier, when we were talking about Spellblade and Blood Price, in combination with Summoner, now you're starting to get crazy. If you have Red Mage double cast as its secondary action, and you have Blood Price as its support skill, what you can do is every single turn you can summon, like if you're worried about losing too much health, every turn you can summon Maduin to attack enemies, and then Unicorn yourself to restore all the health back that you lost from Blood Price. So every turn you get summons, no matter what. And they're free as well. They're quote unquote free. And then on top of that, you can cure in yourself, so you have regen, so you're getting health back that way too. There's also Phoenix, which again is like half your total HP bar heal. It's a very potent heal. And it revives allies. So like, this thing gets out of control really quickly, especially with double cast. So yeah, this thing is like we're talking, it's the best magic class in the game. And if Parivir just weren't so potent at one-shotting things, it would probably be the best class, I would say. Yeah, just really good. And you can get Summoner relatively early, so until you do get, like, Have MP and all that stuff, you're still doing lots. Like, Summoner is such a huge impact on the battle that even really early, when you only get, like, Ifrit for a while, it's still just insanely strong. Okay, next we have White Monk. A tier. Putting it lower than A tier is kind of criminal. White Monk just has a lot of stuff going for it. The argument I see against White Monk is that Master Monk is just better, because in every way Master Monk has better stat growth. But you're really kind of shafting what White Monk does instead. And White Monk has ranged abilities that scale on physical attack. They have Aura Burst, they have Air Render, and they have Earth Render. So you have an Earth spell, you have an Air spell, and you have an AoE just ranged physical option, which Master Monk does not have. Master Monk really suffers by not having range, but if you pair them with White Monk, then you're laughing. And White Monk has the same skill that Master Monk has, where you can heal yourself and remove all debuffs. So that's pretty good. White Monk also has access to a revive, which Master Monk does not have. White Monk also has a burial skill, which allows you to get rid of undead, which is really good. And then they also have a cleanse in Holy Sign. And on top of that, none of their skills cost MP, which I'm pretty sure is the same for Master Monk. And then lastly, they have access to Reflex as their reaction ability, which again, I value Reflex more than I value Counter, so that's good. I mean, White Monk also learns Counter, but, Reflex is just better. So, White Monk is, like, it's not enough to win fights on its own. It does get overwhelmed really badly. It doesn't have like any way to amp its damage, it's only like a range damage dealer, and it's only like base whatever your physical is. However, it does have really good support stuff like revive and the ability to banish dead and a cleanse. And it's enough that like I'm not mad to have white monks on my team, especially until I start getting master monks, and even then, like you could put white monk abilities on other stuff like a gladiator, because we'll get to it later, but gladiator has a high, I think the highest attack growth that isn't master monk, um, and so having white monk abilities on a gladiator is good because you can make use of your attack stat then. Yeah, I don't know. White monk is it's good. It's like I'd rather have a white monk than a Liznitsta. I'd rather have a white monk than even a Templar, because like white monk doesn't have abysmal speed growth, and it doesn't have 3 movement. It has 4 movement. So white monk is at 61%, which is not bad at all by any means. I'm pretty sure that's the 4th best for Bunga, but yeah, I don't know. I just like I would rather have a white monk than a paladin. you know. So yeah, I think it's deserving of A tier. Again, it's definitely not on the same level as Master Monk, because Master Monk can solo stuff, and they do have objectively better growth in every stat. But White Monk does have things that it brings to the table that Master Monk doesn't have. That is enough to distinguish them. Next we have Sage. Sage is A tier, I think. Okay. Yeah, Sage is A tier. Really good. I mentioned it briefly earlier with new Mou Time Mage. But if you have Sage as your secondary to a new Mou Time Mage and you bring a Juggler, you can constantly quicken each other, and you essentially keep getting, like, you can get infinite mana doing that. And Sage has access to Ultima. So you can end up having a new Mao that can cast Ultima every turn on any unit in the whole map that you want to use it on, because you can also traverse the whole map in essentially the same turn. Um, so I really like having Time Mage and Sage as secondary. But Sage also has some stuff that kind of makes it stand out on its own. Um, Sage growths are like pretty, like just a little bit above average across the board, except for their speed is 48%, but New Mao is always kind of slow. They also have access to water and air, which is like some of the best elemental types to have, because like a lot of things are weak to both air and water. Um, and because like you're definitely going to be using Have MP if you're using Sage, so that way you can use Ultima more often. Um, Sage also has access to Asunaga, which is like a cleanse in an AoE, which is really good. They also have access to. You're not going to be using Scathe, and you're not going to be using Giga Flare. They are non-elemental magic damage. They are good. Non-elemental magic damage is a good thing to have, but Ultima is here. And if you don't have enough mana to cast Ultima all the time, Sage learns Bio, which is non-elemental magic damage that has a chance to poison. So, but Sage on its own is like one of the best magic classes as well. They can't solo stuff; they need a lot of help. Um, like they need allies to like help tank stuff for them. So they aren't like able to solo fights. Um, but they also get the reflex reaction ability, which again is really good. In my opinion, one of the best reaction abilities to have. So Sage have just like they have really high power spells, but that's it really. They don't have much else. Again, they can cleanse things with Asunaga, but that's it as like their support option. And so, actually, I need to see, does Time Mage have? Time Mage does not have a cleanse option. So Time Mage has Undo, which allows you to reset HP, but it doesn't get rid of debuffs. So Sage's Asunaga actually kind of fits well with Time Mage. But again, you can have Sage be paired with something else. You don't need it to be with Time Mage. You could do it with, I don't know, maybe you do Arcanist or something. So this class is enough to be an A tier. It's really high powered spells is what makes it so strong. And again, being able to have access to have MP as a new Mou is essential. If Sage didn't have that, it would be way worse than it is. And now we have Soldier. Soldier is basically the same as Banga's Warrior. They're like tit for tat, basically the same unit, except they don't have access to the gravity spell thing. So, a little bit worse. The only thing Soldier has going for it is that it has the highest HP growth in Humes, and that's a bit of a toss-up on whether or not you think that's good, so... Not much else I could really say about it. Again, it's the same unit as the Bongo Warrior, and I already talked about that, so... yeah, they have, like, speed debuff and stuff, but without it also dealing damage, it's kind of bad. Fighter is B tier. They have ranged physical options, like Air Render and Aura Blast, so that's good. If you're using a Hume like Parivir, and you want range, you can put Fighter as its secondary. You probably won't do that. You can do it, but you probably won't. You'll probably have Paladin as your Parivir secondary, but I do like having Fighter secondary on Parivir, just because then you don't have to rely on that 3-ranged air spell as your ranged option. You can use Aura Blast in the turns that it comes up. Fighters on their own are pretty good offensive units. They have 10 attack growth, which is just 1 less than Parivir, and they have 8 defense, which is not the worst thing ever. Their speed is a little lackluster, but 53% is still something. It's better than Paladin. But this unit, all in all, doesn't bring much else to the table, and it's really good as a secondary option to other units, so that's why it's in B tier. And there's not really much else I could say about Fighter. Thief, basically the same reason why Moogle Thief is in here. I don't need to repeat myself. See me talking about Moogle if you want to know why Human Thief is in D tier. Defender. Every single time I look at Defender, I like it more and more. But it is essentially... It's similar to Lanista in that it's like a tank class, but Lanista is more about survivability and like drain spells. Defender ends up being more about just raw tank. Defender's growths are pretty good. 11 defense is simply really good. And then if you pump some levels of a bishop into this, you can get some resistance stats too. 8 attack is like not the best, especially when you have, Gladiator, which actually Gladiator has 12 attack growth, which is even more than Master Monk. But when you have stuff like that running around, 8 is not really that great. And its speed stat is only 45%, or its speed growth is 45%, which is kind of meh. But it does get 8 HP, so that's pretty good as well. So yeah, it ends up being like your tank. Like you use it if you want defense on your Banga, you level it up as Defender. But what Defender has is really unique skills that are meant for tanking stuff. Their big thing is they have access to Bulwark, which makes them immune to all damage until the next turn. And so what you can do is you can run your Defender into the middle of enemies, have counter as your reaction ability, and then just constantly be clicking Bulwark. And essentially what that means is you're taking no damage, and you're countering them to like, because Bulwark takes your action for the turn. So if all you're doing is always bulwarking, like you're not dealing damage to the enemy with your action. However, if you have counter, like the enemies will eventually attack you, and then you'll be dealing damage with your counter ability. And then if you put Ribbon Bearer as this thing's support ability, and then equip a ribbon, you're essentially immune to everything. And yeah, you could just run in and just constantly be bulwarking, and then just rely on counter to do damage for you, which is really unique and really good in defense situations. It also gets access to a self re-raise and regen buff, which is really good, actually. I like it a lot. Yes, it can be cleansed away, but the fact that like you can just put it on yourself whenever you like get a good opportunity to, it's like that's a really good buff to have on yourself, and it allows it so that like if you want a bonga with the ability to cast re-raise and regen on itself, you could do that. Like you can main a white monk and have defender as like its secondary abilities. That way you have ranged physical attacks, you have a self heal and self cleanse, you have a self re-raise and regen, you have bulwark which makes you invincible for the turn. So you like there is good things from the defender class, and the last thing that's good about them is they have rend weapon, which allows you to destroy weapons. And again, there's a lot of units in the game where if you destroy their weapons, they become basically harmless. Like a lot of the later game ninjas and Paravirs, if you could destroy their weapons, they do a lot less damage after that. So this class is pretty good. But they end up only being a tank class, and it's the same reason why Lanista is in B tier, where they don't have anything to augment their damage. They do have a self-destruct move, which is something. You can just be like, hey, I don't want this unit to be in the game anymore, so I'm going to sacrifice my defender for it, which is something that Lanista doesn't have. But in the end, it can't really be any higher than B tier because, it doesn't have a way to augment its damage, and it's so focused on tank that it doesn't really like you have to rely on a gimmick to really make this thing. Like it can solo encounters, but it can't be against encounters that have ranged, and it also can't be like it also takes hours for those encounters to finish sometimes. So all right, now we have Hume Hunter, B tier. I see people try and gas up hunters a lot. I don't like them. I actually have a mind to put them in C tier, but I cannot deny that they're a decent secondary class option. Hunters have Ultima, and humans have MP. However, if you're using Ultima on humans, you want them to be a hunter so that their Ultima is at range. If you're using Ultima on like any of the many melee fighters that humans are, it's rough. Like you're not going to have Parivir secondary hunter abilities so that Parivir can use hunter, because Parivir already have really good damaging abilities. You don't need Ultima for that. You're not going to have Ninja have Hunter as its secondary abilities because, like, Ninja. How do I describe? Like, it's kind of it's not synergistic with Ninja. What Ninja's trying to do. Again, melee ranged Ultima could be fine on Ninja, like especially if you're trying to pump magic into Ninja so that their ninjutsu doesn't suck. I mean, it's always gonna suck. You don't level up human as Black Mage and then turn them into a ninja. You just don't do that. But like the have MP that is required for the Ultima on Ninja is so unsynergistic because Ninja's abilities cost 4 MP to cast. So now they're at 2 MP, and your Ultima is like it doesn't make a lot of sense to do that. And then lastly, Ultima is based on magic stat on its damage, right? And that's probably the biggest problem of human Ultima, is that human magic casters just aren't that common unless you're using Illusionist or Seers, and even then, like, you're not going to be using an Illusionist to cast Ultima. You're going to be using an Illusionist to cast enemy-wide spells. You're not going to be using Seer to cast Ultima. You're going to be using Seer to cast Magic Frenzy, you know? So, yeah, they end up being decent. You know what? They don't end up being decent secondaries. They are primary classes that don't do a lot. They have Sidewinder, which is really good against the monster fights, but not every fight is a monster fight. You do fight a lot of like non-monster encounters. So Sidewinder is really good, but it's not good enough. And Ultima on its own is also not good enough. Yes, you can have MP, and yes, it is at range, but like unless you leveled up a shit ton as Black Mage, it's not good enough, in my opinion. And there's just better human damage classes out there. I would take a human White Mage over a Hunter every single time, unless like it's a monster encounter, and even then, like, I still would like a human White Mage over a Hunter. Maybe that's harsh of me, but like if I want a Hunter class, Gria is just better. Like I'd rather just use a Gria Hunter than a human Hunter. I'm sorry, that's just how it is. Beastmaster. Beastmaster is D tier. Beastmaster, this is like one of the few times where weapons matter. They use instruments, and instruments are the worst damaging weapons in the game, which kind of stinks because Beastmasters are meant for physical damage. They have 10 attack growth and 8 defense growth, which is the best out of any new mount class, and they have 60% speed growth, which is the best out of any new mount class. Beastmasters are meant purely for level up stats. Okay. And even if you wanted to make a physical Numao, you're not going to. But even if you did, Beastmaster is not a good class because instruments suck. They suck at dealing damage. So then, what we would have to look at Beastmaster's skills to find value. And unfortunately, Beastmasters are the like monster tamer class. They are meant purely to get your blue mage skills, and that's it. Beastmaster, if you're using Beastmaster skills legitimately in fights, you are doing something wrong. The problem is that if you are in a position to reliably use Beastmaster to take control of monsters and use their effects in the fight, if you are in that position, you probably have already won the fight. Okay, and the other problem is that monsters, they use their MP on their skills basically always as soon as they're able to. There are some times where like the RNG rolls where they don't. But what that means is that when you use Beastmaster to use monster skills, they will almost never have enough MP to cast skills that you would want to use. So the Beastmaster skills end up being basically useless. And then again, if you are able to do that, like if the monster does have enough MP to cast spells and you're using your Beastmaster to use the ability, one of two things happened. Either you pump them full of an ether shell from your Cannoneer, in which case if you're doing that, you've probably already won the fight anyway. Or the RNG roll happened where the monster just didn't use the ability, but yeah. So another thing is Beastmaster basically has to be beside the monsters they want to take control of too. Like if they had longer range, maybe they would be a little more useful, but you have to basically be beside the monster as the Beastmaster. And when you use the skills of the monster, the other units that you want to cast a spell on also need to be in range of the monster. So it's just super unrealistic, super inconsistent, And I've basically had it maybe once, twice in 1,000 hours of playing a game, maybe once or twice where I was able to use a monster skill with my Beastmaster that meant something in the fight. And that we're talking like I use Sprite to use White Wind on my allies, or I made a werewolf roar or something. It's just not good as like a class that you take seriously. It's just not good. The only thing you use Beastmaster for is you stop the monster that you want to take control of Beastmaster. You put your Blue Mage beside it. You put your Beastmaster beside it. You pump it with an Ether Shell. You Beastmaster the monster skill onto your Blue Mage. That's the only time you're ever using Beastmaster. Yeah. I like the idea of like a physical Numao, but Beastmaster's not it. And the only other physical Numao class is also not it either. So, unfortunately, just abysmal. Yeah, so now we have Seer. Seer is A tier. It is not S tier. I know that Cruiser Complex talked about how Magic Frenzy is really good, especially when paired with Illusionist. The problem with Magic Frenzy, in my opinion, is that you're using either rods or books for your physical attack. And if you're using rods or books for your physical attack with Magic Frenzy, you're doing no physical damage. Seer and Illusionist are not meant to deal physical damage. Yes, technically you are getting free attacks, especially on Illusionist, where you can hit all of the enemy units with a magic spell, and then because Magic Frenzy will activate on your magic, it also hits every enemy with a physical attack too. Yes, that on paper seems really good. The problem is that if you're playing Illusionist as your main class, your physical hits are doing like 10 damage. Your magic's doing like 70 damage, and then your physical hits are doing an extra 10 damage, which comparatively is really bad. I mean, like if that 10 damage was enough to mean the difference between killing an enemy or not, at that point does it really matter? You're fielding more than one unit in a fight, you know. And even then, like your illusionist has global range to it. You just park it in the corner of the map and you throw illusion spells all game. Like, could you not just wait another turn to cast illusion spells again? My point is that if you're using Magic Frenzy on Illusionist, the physical hits are doing nothing. Okay. Or if it's the other way around, if you're using Seer as your main class and Illusionist as your secondary, and you're able to equip books, books are better than rods at dealing physical damage, but we're talking like peanuts here. We're talking just a little bit more damage. Like we're talking the difference between 10 and 15 damage physical hits. The best book in the game does give decent attack. It does do decent damage. But it also comes down to another problem we have. And that is that if you're min-maxing stats, it is almost impossible to get maxed attack and maxed magic on a Hume without them also being like super frail or super slow. I mean, unless you're like save scumming your speed stat. So even if you do get 999 attack and 999 magic, and you're able to like make the most out of a Seer Illusionist combo, it's still not ideal. Because books just don't do a lot of damage anyway. But yes, if you do min-max your stats and you do get like a Seer Illusionist with 999 attack and 999 magic, yes, you are able to basically get 2 actions out of your magic frenzy, right? You're able to hit everything with magic, and then you're also able to hit everything with quote unquote strong melee hits. And another cool thing you could do is you could have Seer as your primary, Illusionist as your secondary, dual wield as its support skill, although you won't want to do that. You definitely want half MP because Illusionist skills are 32 MP without it. But you could do dual wield, and then because Seer has access to like the ability to give themselves MP restore, you could first turn give yourself MP, second turn illusion spell. You hit everything with magic, and you get 2 auto attacks on them. So yes, that's good, but again, getting maxed attack and max magic is almost impossible, and you have to sacrifice your other stats for it. Yes, it shouldn't matter, because again, you're parking this unit in the corner of the map, you shouldn't be taking damage, and then you're just using that. But yeah, it takes a lot of investment, too much investment in my opinion, and even once you get there, like I would it's still not enough damage because books are not good weapons for auto attacks. This is post editing me here, and I realized that I was like super hyper focused talking about specifically Magic Frenzy on Seer, and totally forgot to mention that Seer has other abilities that do make it really, really good. They have tier 2 black magic spells, and they have the tier 2 cure spell, which, I mean, you would much rather have the tier 3 spells if you could only choose one of the 3 tiers to have, but tier 2 is serviceable. Seer also have a raise spell, which is good, and I mentioned it briefly, but they have a self restore MP skill, which is actually pretty good, especially in combination with the Illusionist that I keep talking about. So this class is still really good, but I think by now you kind of get the point that like on their own, they're not very they're not able to solo encounters, and they don't provide enough support to break other classes. And like they specifically can break Illusionist to a degree. And then one other thing I figured I should just interject here as well is that earlier when I was talking about max stats, I totally forgot to mention that like if you have 999 attack and 999 magic, at that point, why even Magic Frenzy at all? Like your illusion spells should be basically one-shotting anything anyways, so Magic Frenzy at that point is basically worthless. um, so yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, definitely good, definitely something you play with, but it's not S tier, is my whole point. Yes, back to the past me. I don't know. It's a little complicated. It's not enough for S tier. I cannot field a Seer Illusionist on its own and win fights. Sometimes I can, but not reliably. And it's not until like I've reached level 99 and have max stats that I could start doing that. So yeah, I mean, there's not much else I could say. You could also do like Magic Frenzy, like you do Parivir as your main class, Seer as your secondary, and then you could you could Magic Frenzy using your Seer skills, but then you're only doing like you're only hitting a couple enemies with it rather than every enemy with the illusion skill. So, um, yeah, I mean, I could see why people would say this is S. Me personally, it's not. It's definitely a really good class, and being able to like pump yourself with magic and stuff is good. But it's like it's so close to greatness. But I find that a lot of the times I would much rather have units that can one shot kill something rather than a unit that can like do a little bit of magic and a little bit of physical damage. You know what I mean? So okay, next we have Arcanist. Arcanist is kind of in the same boat as Sage is for me. Recently, I've been kind of coming around on Arcanist. Um, I used to hate them because they're quote unquote the mathematician class, where like they have the level spells, and those are so inconsistent to make work properly. Yes, you can kind of grind the game out to get it so that they do work properly, but you're putting in all that effort for effects that you could probably just get the same effects out of, a Time Mage or an Illusionist or whatever. But what Arcanists do have is they have Death, which is an insta-kill. And you can give Trank to this thing, and you can start insta-killing stuff. And then against the things that it can't insta-kill, it has access to gravity. So against like bosses in particular that have tons of HP, you could Trank this thing and then walk up and start gravitating the bosses to just chip away their health immediately. Which is really good. And this class also has access to Drain. So it is able to, like, obviously New Mao is not great. You're not gonna like tanking hits with New Mao. But Arcanist does have survivability in being able to cast Drain. So insta-kills and gravity on its own is enough to make this like a really strong class. And then it also has access to the Pierce support ability against specifically the encounters that you have to deal with Reflect. But you'll always have MP with Arcanist. And then even if you don't have access to Trank from the Green Mage, like it relies heavily on Trank, but even without it, like you still have Drain, and you can still, like, it's still like 50% that the death or the gravity will land. So, I mean, even if it's every other turn that you're killing something, you're still killing something every other turn, that's pretty good. And the reason why they're similar to Sage, in my opinion, is because they're essentially the same. How do I describe this, man? Sage is like really strong magic damage, and Arcanist is really strong just magic in general. They're meant for like insta kills and like doing tons of damage to bosses or units with high HP. They're similar in that their magic is really high impact, is what I'm trying to say. So, Moogle Knight. Moogle Knight is shitty. Moogle Knight is C tier. There are some situations where Moogle Knight is good. Like, I mean, they do have 10 attack, 11 defense, and 9 resistance as their stat growth. Their stat growths are actually pretty good. Their speed is only 48%, which is pretty bad for a Moogle. But yeah, their stat growth, other than their speed, is actually really strong. So most of your Moogles are probably going to be doing a ton of leveling as a knight. However, the problem with Moogle Knights is that their skills are just bad. They do have access to Ultima, but Moogles don't have access to have MP, so it's full cost Ultima, which is not great. And Moogle Knight's abilities are they're so mediocre to bad. They have a self-heal, I think. Yeah, they have a self-heal and debuff purge, which is fine, but the self-heal is dog-ass. They have the ability to destroy equipment with Moogle Disarm, which is, fine. But it's random what piece of equipment you're destroying, which is not fine. But, it has a Self-Astra, which is fine. And they do have a ranged physical attack, which is, But the problem with Moogle Knight is it has no way to amp its damage. It's just base damage, and it gets access to Ultima, which you'll need to be leveling as a Black Mage to get any real damage out of. And it's full cost Ultima, so... Yeah. Its stat growths are great, but it's just so mediocre otherwise in everything else. So... Okay, Alchemist. Alchemist. The problem I have with Alchemist is that it has no elemental spells. All of its damaging spells are non-elemental. Which would be fine. Like non-elemental magic is good to have, but it's good to have in combination of other spells that do elemental damage. That way, in like fights where you do have the weakness and it comes up, you can use the elemental spell instead and do more damage. Alchemist has a problem where it has like two non-elemental damage spells, and you're essentially just only going to be using one of them. The other one is like it's not worth using the other one. Why would you use the other one when you could just use the one that does more damage, right? And then the rest of Alchemist is like it has Astra, which is good. It has Rasp, which is situational at best. It has a worse bio in that you can poison a target without damage, which is bad. And it has the ability to toad units, but it costs 32 MP. And with half MP, that's 16 MP just to toad a unit. That's bad. So it has essentially two skills that you want, being Astra and the high damage non-elemental magic skill. And it also has like the ability to reduce MP, which again is situational, and then it has a unique skill which allows you to transmute critical HP enemies into items, which is bad. I mean, if you always got like dark matter or something out of it, it would be amazing, but you don't. So, and like getting an enemy to critical HP and keeping them there long enough to walk up and transmute them with your alchemist, I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. So their skills are pretty bad. All things considered, like non-elemental magic damage again is fine, but if you want that, just use a Sage and start spamming Ultima, or Bio even, because then it's not elemental magic damage and you have a chance to poison, The gimmick out of Alchemist is that they can use items as a third action slot. So if you want to use items on every other class in the game, you have to sacrifice your secondary actions for it. Whereas Alchemist, you can have the Alchemist actions, you can have another class actions, and you can have items. So they're unique in that. But the problem is that items are not that good. The cheat items are amazing, obviously. So having access to them all the time is great, but if you are in a situation where you need to use cheat items, you should probably be rethinking your strategy rather than relying on your cheat items. So it's a bit of a toss-up on whether or not items are actually good. They are good. They give you access to some tools that are really tough to get, and they just give you access, like any class can have access to them. Like revives are usually pretty rare to get, but if you slap items on any class, then you have a revive on any class. But so Alchemist does have some cool things, but I find that it's just not good enough. And the thing is, you can't use it really good as a secondary class on anything that Numo have. Like you're not playing Sage secondary Alchemist skills because the only thing that Alchemist has over Sage is Astra. Sage does everything else way better than the Alchemist skills. And you're not putting Alchemist on your Arcanist because your Arcanist only cares about casting Death and Drain and Gravity. Right, so you'd want more support focused stuff, like maybe White Mage on your Arcanist. You're not putting Alchemist on your Time Mage. That's a fucking joke. So, yeah, I don't value Alchemist as much as Cruiser Complex does. If you watch his tier list, he kind of values it quite a bit. I think he puts it in A tier. I don't. I think Alchemist needs a lot of support to be good, and even then, like just intrinsically, Numau have other options that are just better. So, anyways, that was a lot. Next we have Bishop. I like Bishop a lot. I think they are definitely worthy of A class. The argument people have for Bishop being a bad class is that Banga aren't good with magic stats, in which case I just have to point you at Trickster and be like, well, Trickster have 10 magic growth and 78% speed, so... and Bishop have a lot, like, they have a wide range of options. They have quite a lot, which ends up making them a good support class, as well as damage. Like, they're just good at covering a lot of things. They have a heal option in Kira, which is, like, believe it or not, that's pretty good. They have a dispel, just a straight up dispel. So the downside to using Roar on Blue Mage is that it hits everything, including yourself. Bishop have the ability to target with their dispel, which is really good. They have access to Holy Magic, which is a bit of a toss up on whether or not you like it. Personally, I think it's good. Because it does tons of damage, and the Holy Element is always a nice element to have when dealing damage. It has access to a wall spell, and it's an area of effect as well, so you get Protect and Shell on multiple units, up to 5. That's good. They have access to Water and Arrow, which is the same as Sage, but and Water and Air are really good elements to have because a lot of enemies are weak to them. And the last thing, and probably the most important thing about Bishop that I like the most, is that it has access to Break. It's the only source of Break out of any class in the whole game. And Break essentially might as well read Death or Stop, or it's an insta-kill. You can trank your Bishop and then start casting Break, and then you're laughing. Break does cost 24 MP, so with half MP, it's still only 12, so you still need 2 turns to cast it. But again, it's worth it to either shell your Bishop with your Cannoneer, and then you start breaking things, and when things are turned to stone, you can rob them without any accuracy penalties. So, yeah, Bishop is just a really, really, really strong class. It's really strong. Like, really strong. It can stand on its own, no problem. It probably can't win fights on its own because the break spell requires Trank, and even with Trank, it still is 2 turns to cast it. However, the Bishop, like, it just has so much that's good. Like, the only downside is that it's a magic class, and the only other magic class that Banga have is Trickster. But you just level up a ton as Trickster, have Bishop be your primary class, and then give it Gladiator spells as secondary. That way you have Ultima on your Bishop, and you already have such a wide array of skills that you could use on Bishop that, only having Gladiator for Ultima is fine. And your Ultima is doing so much damage. And the last thing about Bishop that makes them really strong is they are the class that gives Banga Have MP. So, I don't know. I don't see why people say this class sucks. It's actually really good. It's really good. And then the last thing I will mention is that it has Pilfer. Okay, and Pilfer steals loot. It's the same as Trickster's Mug, but you don't get Trickster till so late in the game that having Bishop be your having Pilfer is fine. So you end up using Bishops for your looting process anyway. So, like, it being lower than A tier is criminal. It can stand on its own as a class. It can be used in it has good synergies with other class because of just how wide of array of its spells are. Have MP is a godsend. I mean, this class is almost built for Have MP because all of its skills except for Barrier and Pilfer are more than 10 MP cost. But with Have MP, you can cast them all on the first turn. So, yeah, putting this thing lower than A is criminal in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, I love having Bishop. It's good, and like I said, Break is an insta kill. So, yes. Okay, so now we have Illusion. Hume Illusionists are basically, they're in the same category as Hume Seers. Like, you can't talk about Hume Illusionist without talking about Hume Seers, and vice versa. The problem with Illusionist is that their skills cost a ton of mana, and even with have MP, you're still taking 2 turns to start casting Illusionist spells. You can Ether Shell your Illusionist, but it's still quite a bit. And let me see, we have water. Okay, they do have a wide range of magic elements that they can use, and they also have a non-elemental magic hit, which is really good. So if you have an illusionist, you're basically always going to be able to hit things for weakness because they have every element. They have wind, earth, fire, lightning, water. Do they have thunder? Did I say thunder? They have fire, thunder, water. They have holy. They have ice, earth, and wind. So they have every element except for dark. So illusionists are basically always guaranteed to hit elemental weakness, which is really good. And the illusionist spells also do like have decent base damage too. I think it's like the same as tier 2 Black Mage spells or something like that. And they have really high impact spells because they hit all of your enemies for magic damage. But the reason why they're not S tier, the reason why they can't stand on their own, is again because they, even with have MP, their spells still take 2 turns to cast. You can have Seer as your secondary skill, and then Seer has the ability to give themselves MP, so you can offset that way. So don't get me wrong, Illusionist is really, really strong, but they can't solo encounters. They get swarmed really fast. They only have 3 movements, so like even parking yourself in the corner of the map, like the enemies will catch up to you and stuff like that. And they don't quite have enough damage to be able to kill things before you're starting to get hit by their ranged options, you know. They're the same thing as Seer. They're really close to greatness, but they just have enough things holding them back. And the last thing I will talk about with Illusionists is that they have the worst speed growth, I think, out of any unit in the whole game at 35%, which is awful. So you'll be wanting to level up as much as you can as Black Mage and Ninja, and then Illusionist will be your main class after that. And the reason why you want to level up as Black Mage is because Black Mage has more magic and resistance. Like, Black Mage just basically has better stat growths in every single way than Illusionist. Like, Black Mage has 10 magic, 10 resist, and Illusionist has 9 magic and 8 resist. A Black Mage has more speed, and then everything else is the same. So yeah, you'll be wanting to level up as Black Mage more than Illusionist. But the other good thing about Illusionist that makes them better than Seer, in my opinion, is that they are the access to have MP for Humes. Which is such... have MP is... you know what? Actually, I'm going to put Illusionist in S tier. Have MP is such a game changer for so many things that there's some classes that absolutely require it to be useful. Like I said earlier with Bishop, without have MP, Bishop would probably be a lot worse because a lot of their skills cost like 14 mana to cost. But with have MP, you can use them every turn. So yeah, purely like if I have Ninja in S tier, then I have Illusionist in S tier. They're kind of the same deal. The have MP is such a game changer. Dual wield is such a game changer that yeah, they could be an S tier, and they might not be able to solo fights on their own, but they get pretty fucking close. So yeah, you know what? I can put them in S tier. Seer, not quite. Okay, now we have Raptor and Hunter. I'm going to evaluate them as the same thing, because if you're playing Hunter, you want the Raptor secondary abilities. You're not playing Raptor as your main, you're playing Hunter as your main, and Raptor as your second. But if for whatever reason you are going to play Raptor, they can kind of stand on their own too. So they're kind of, in my eyes, they go together. And the reason being is that if you look at Raptor, um, we talked a little bit about how lower speed is really good because it's not like an overhead debuff, it's like a stat debuff. So you can apply it to most things that, like, unless they're wearing a ribbon or whatever. But the reason why the Raptor's so much better than Warrior and Soldier is that it also does your auto attack damage as well. So you auto attack and do the speed down debuff. And the reason why I evaluate it with Hunter is that it also is weapon range. So if you are carrying a great bow, you can speed debuff things from basically halfway across the map. So if you're playing a Gria Hunter, you have Raptor secondaries. Hunters get access to Ultima, and Gria don't have a have MP support skill. So essentially, for 3 turns, you can be speed downing things from halfway across the map, and then on your 4th turn, you can Ultima something. And like because Hunter only has Ultima and then like Sidewinder for monsters, having access to skills that have good effects that also do weapon damage is nice. It's a nice thing to have. And then on top of that, like if you don't feel like speed downing stuff, you can lower defense and lower resistance, and then you're crippling them defensively too. And the reason why Raptors are able to kind of stand on their own is because they have those debuffs, but they also have ranged magic attacks, which is not the greatest, but Raptor does have the best magic growth out of all the Gria classes, so there's that. But Raptors also have the same skill that Defenders have, and that's Bulwark, which allows them to basically be immune from attacks for a turn. So yeah, these two kind of go hand in hand together. If you didn't have Hunter in Gria, then Raptor class would be way worse. And if you didn't have Raptor class, then Hunter in Gria would be way worse. Like Hunter would be C tier, probably even D tier because their Ultima doesn't have MP. And then without Hunter, the Raptor class would probably be either in B or C tier. But because they both exist, they kind of hold each other up in that respect. And I really, really love running a Hunter with Raptor secondary on Gria. They're almost like a staple in my team comps, honestly, because of just being able to speed down stuff from halfway across the map is just so good at crippling opponent teams. And on top of that, it does damage too, so that's just like icing on the cake. There's no way to augment their damage, but Hunters do get the attack up support skills, so you could, in theory, use that. And then on top of that, Raptors also get the reflex reaction ability. And of course, we know how I feel about reflex being really strong. So yeah, yeah. It seems a bit weird having Hume Hunter. Or do I have where did I put Hume Hunters? Here in C tier, and Gria Hunters in A tier, because you'd think that Hume Hunters would be better with have MP, but like I said with Hume Hunters, they just aren't good. Like, they don't have good synergies with anything. Whereas with, Gria, they synergize almost perfectly with the Raptor class. And that, like, I value that a lot. Okay, Gladiator. Whew. Gladiator is rough, man. They are C tier. The problem with Gladiator is that they have 12 attack growth. And 55 speed is nothing to laugh at, and 8 defense is alright, and 8 HP growth is pretty good. So they're just like monster attack damage units. However, if you look at the Gladiator skills, basically all of them are based on magic stat. Right? Your Fire Soul, your Thunder Assault, your Blizzard Tackle, they are all magic stat focused abilities, and Ultima is a magic stat focused ability. And like the other skills it get are either low accuracy or just like a knockback, which attack at weapon damage. So this class has like insane growths, but like all of its skills suck. It doesn't synergize with itself. The only thing, like, you have to be running Trickster as your main class and Gladiator as your secondary in order to make use of the skills. And then the other way around, you're leveling up as Gladiator for a unit like maybe Master Monk or whatever, so that you have tons of attack. But you're not even leveling up as Gladiator if you're doing Master Monk, because Master Monk has better attack, has like only one less attack growth anyway, so it has way better speed. So like, it's just confusing that this unit exists. Because Master Monk has way more speed growth. It has a little bit better resistance at the cost of one attack and a little bit more HP. So Master Monk is arguably on the same playing field as like a unit you want to level up as. So even then, this thing isn't even like unique in that it's like a level up class. I don't know. It's such a travesty. If Gladiator skills were based on its attack damage rather than its magic stat, it would probably be A tier for me. But because it's not, it's sad that it doesn't synergize with itself. Okay, Viera Archer. I put Hume Archers in C tier. Viera Archer are in B tier for me. Just because, actually no, you know what, they're basically the same unit as Hume's. Viera Archer, you can put their skills as secondary to snipers, and then you have focus double shot. But then you have the same idea with humans, where you can have a Hume ninja with dual wield, and then secondary archer, and then you have focus dual wield strikes, which is essentially the same thing. So yeah, they end up being the same. Viera Archer, the sad thing about them is that assassins exist, and assassins have essentially the same things, if not better things, than Viera Archer, but otherwise these functionally are the exact same class. So I'm not gonna talk about that much. Scholar is D tier. I never use these. You know what? They're a never use. Fuck scholars. If you're gonna sit here and copium me and be like, oh, if you wear fire robes so that all your units have absorb fire magic, and then you bring a scholar, and then you just fire nova, and then you're dealing damage to enemies all fight, and then you're restoring HP. You know, and it's just you win the fight. And let's be real here, okay? If you are fielding only units that wear robes to a fight, that means you're not using Parivir. That means you're not using Cannoneer. That means you're not using Blue Mage. That means you're not using a Master Monk. It means you're not using a Ravager. It means you're not using a Ninja. It means you're not using a Ranger. It means you're not using Assassin. You know, you're using Green Mage Summoner, Time Mage, Illusionist. You're using magic damage classes. You could use a Paladin. Paladin can randomly wear robes. But if you're doing that, like if you're going out of your way to actively give yourself worse statted gear just so that you can have an absorb element, you need to like go outside, touch some grass, you know, maybe find a cute girl, start talking to her, you know. Develop social skills, man. If you're using Scholar to do that, you need to rethink your life, my man. You know what the funny thing about Scholar is? Scholar doesn't even have fire damage. So you can't even use flame robes. You have to use ice robes. It was so funny. I was looking at it the other day. I'm like, so, okay, Scholar has this, like, absorb fire thing. They don't have a fire spell. They have earth damage, they have ice damage, they have lightning damage, they have dark damage. That's it! Like, oh my god, dude, scholars are so bad, man. So even if you're going out of your way to like purposely nerf your team and like every fight you have to change their equipment and you're only fielding stuff that can wear robes, and even if you're going out of the way to essentially make the game worse for yourself just so you can have this cheesy strategy, even then Scholar's damage is shit cuz Scholar level up is attack damage. Scholar gets 10 attack on level up and 7 magic. Okay. New Mao has access to Black Mage, which is 11 magic. Okay. So I'm sorry, dude. Scholars are bad. Okay. You're doing damage to yourself most of the time. And I even hear some crazy, crazy copium coming from Cruza Complex saying that like, oh, you could do like a ice shield and then replenish MP. That way you're taking half damage from the Nova and you're restoring MP. For some reason he's under the impression that the replenish MP reaction ability gives you back MP equal to the amount of MP that the spell cost is. That is wrong. You get MP based on the amount of damage you take. So if you're taking half damage from these spells, you're restoring less MP as well. It's based on the damage you receive, not what the spell cost is. So you're gaining like what, like 5 MP from back from the spell? Like no, dude, Scholar's bad. Scholar's bad. The only gimmick they have is they have the ability to study enemies so that you know what their loot is. Unfortunately, in our year of our Lord 2024, we have the wiki, so study is useless. And then they also have a cool thing called natural selection, which allows you to pick a race and then deal damage to that race. So under the very few fights where you're fighting like all Humes or something, you can just not field the Hume in that fight and then use Scholar to do natural selection all the time. Not that you'd want to do that, because if you aren't fielding Humes, then you don't have your Blue Mage, you don't have your one-shot wonder Parivir, you know? Like, yeah, no, Scholar's just bad. And then even their, like, cool, unique stuff is like, mediocre at best. So, never use these things. They suck. Their stat growths are shit, too, because physical Numao are a myth. And for whatever reason gets 10 attack in its growth, which is fucking hilarious. Okay, Animist. Animists are cool, except that they use instruments as their weapons, and we already know how I feel about instruments. Yeah, I mean, Animists have some things that they can do that are a positive effect on the battle, but it's so shitty that like you know, like, oh man, a protect shell on one target. Oh man, oh, I can berserk somebody maybe. Oh dude, that's berserk, man. Chocobo rush, I don't even know what that does, man. Oh, I can turn somebody into a frog. Oh, guess what? It's a 22 MP cost on a unit that doesn't have half MP. Oh, here we go. They have They have the ability to fully restore HP, so like from 0 to 100%. But it's a 22 MP cost skill, again, on a unit that doesn't have half MP. And honestly, full restores aren't that big of a deal, because Summoner with, like, map-wide Phoenix or map-wide Unicorn exist. White Mages exist. And most of the time you'll be able to restore full health anyway. They have a skill called Friend, which is a random summon, which is basically a coin flip on whether or not it's good, because the summon could be a damage summon or it could be a heal summon. And so if you're using it on enemies, you could just randomly end up giving them regen, which is hilarious. Yeah, so this unit, like, almost is borderlining on never use, but luckily you could choose not to use the shit that's like that's a double-edged sword. So Red Mage is A tier. I mean, They could be S tier on double cast alone, but double cast is not enough to win fights. Um, they have to be used in synergy of so much other stuff, but I will not deny that double cast Green Mage is amazing. Double cast Summoner is amazing. Um, but yeah, I don't need to talk about Red Mage because all you're doing with Red Mage is double cast, and that's it. Um, Red Mage does have like Shell and Protect and Cure and like low level spells, but all of them are inconsequential. You're never using Red Mage for spells, you're using them for double cast and then another class. You're not even using Red Mage as like a main class, but the reason why I don't have them in B tier is because double cast is just so game defining. So yeah, they're A tier. I don't really need to say much else about them. Like even their growths or anything don't really matter, because again, they're just double cast fodder. Elementalists are A tier. They're really good on their own. All of their abilities do tons of damage. They're the same as raw spells, I think. They do the same damage as like Fyra, Thundera, and Blizzara. Except Elementalists have every element except for Dark, I believe, or no, every element but Holy. Right? Or do they even have a Dark? Lightning, Water, Earth. They do have Dark. So Elementalists have every element except for Holy. All of their spells do, like I said, they do more damage than the tier 1 Black Mage spells, which is good enough. All of their damaging spells also have the chance to have debuffs, and those are good. I mean, if you look at Parivir, it's the same thing. Elementalists are kind of, sort of like the magic versions of Parivir, except not really because they don't do nearly as much damage. But Elementalists have a 10 magic growth, which is really good. The only thing that beats that is Summoner with 11. So Elementalists are a really good magic casting class. The only downside is they have a really slow speed. Like even for Viera, 41% is just bad. So you won't be leveling up too much as Elementalist. Like you'll want your speed stat from elsewhere. And like their tank stats are fine. Viera don't break 7 for anything except for Summoner on their defensive stats. So having 7 defense stat growth and 7 resist growth is just average. So they end up actually being a pretty solid class on their own. Stat growth wise, like for Viera, they're pretty above average, I would say. And their skills are all really good, and they all come with the chance to debuff targets. So they're actually really good. And because they have like low MP cost on everything, you can throw half MP on this thing, and then have Red Mage double cast. And so you're double casting these abilities that do decent damage, are probably going to be hitting for weakness, and they also have a good chance to cause debuffs, which can be increased with Trank. So, yeah, this class is actually really, really strong. I do like having Elementalists. They also have something really cool, and that's that they have a non-holy element heal, which typically that doesn't really matter. However, there are a couple missions in the game where you have to protect an undead unit, and like there's no way to restore health to undead because they take damage to holy, even if it's heal spells, and they take damage to potions too, except for Elementalist White Flame Heal. So in those missions specifically where you have to defend undead units, you can heal them in those missions with Elementalist, which is really like it's super unique. Other than in those missions, it's a nothing burger. It's like the same as like a Cura spell. But even then, having healing in what would be an all damaging class, like just randomly, like that's good. That's a good thing to have. Like if Parivir randomly have heals, that would be pretty good, I would say. I mean, Parivir already have that thing where they can sacrifice their life and heal all allies to full HP or whatever. But yeah, like we see it even in like White Monk, their ability to heal themselves is good. So imagine being able to heal other people's like yeah, Elementalist is really good. I think it's slept on. I don't think a lot of people respect it, which is a shame. New Mou Illusionist. They give the have MP, which again is game changing. So if I have Ninja and Hume Illusionist up here, then these need to be up here too. New Mou Illusionist are a little bit worse than Hume Illusionist because they don't have the Magic Frenzy thing. But other than that, for all intents and purposes, they're functionally the same unit. Because New Mou, like, they don't have synergy with this class with other stuff, and humans only really have synergy with the Magic Frenzy from the Seer. So yeah, they're functionally the same otherwise. So I don't really need to talk about them more. I mean, I have lots. I just realized I have lots of S tier units, but there's just a lot of good synergies with these units up here that I can't ignore. Human Black Mage, they're functionally the same as Mou Black Mage, so I'm not going to talk about them. Again, they're Geomancy. Actually, they're probably a little bit better because they can give Geomancy, and that's like the cornerstone for your Parivir. So, but otherwise, they're functionally the same as Mou. And now we have the special classes. Heritor. Heritor's B tier. They have all of their offensive skills deal physical damage. So they scale off your physical skill, which is good because, you know, as humans, you're probably doing a lot of leveling as Parivir, so you're going to have lots of attack damage. Heritor also have some interesting like support stuff. All of it's not really that important, but they do have a skill that sacrifices your life and fully restores HP and revives, I think, everybody. Yeah, it like revives all of your allies and it fully restores their HP at the cost of your own life, which is good, like in a pinch. That's a nice like support skill to have. But on their own, they're not really that big of a deal. They don't have any damage augmenting stuff. All of their stuff hits for base damage. They do have like damage plus debuff, which is, you know, it's just fine. But like they end up probably being better as like a secondary class to another thing. Like Blue Mage, for example. Heritor Blue Mage is a pretty good combo. Another cool thing you could do is because Heritor has access to all bladed weapons, and I think poles as well. Because they have access to a wide range of weapons, you can equip them with 2 of the best weapons in the game of like different class types, and then give them dual wield, and then give them Seer as their secondary option, and that way you can Seer magic, Frenzy to do like a magic damage hit, and then 2 really, really strong melee hits after that. But again, if you're using Magic Frenzy on anything that isn't Illusionist, it's rough to kind of justify that, but it is still really good. So you could do that. I do see some people do that where they go Heritor, Seer, and then the Magic Frenzy thing. But yeah, on their own, the Heritor is better as like a support class to something else. So that's why it's in B tier. The bad thing about Heritor is that Blue Mage stack growths are better than Heritor. In every conceivable way. Like, they're the exact same, except Blue Mage has 1 more defense and 1 more resistance on their stat growth. So you're not leveling up as Heritor, you're leveling up as Blue Mage. Because if you're not, you're actively nerfing yourself. So, yeah, it's kind of a travesty, because I really like Heritor as a concept. And, like, some of their skills are actually good. Like Leonard having 4-tile range and being able to hit multiple units, and then they have like a damage plus slow, and they have some other things. Like, they do have some things that are good, but it's just not enough. Like, it's very lackluster in the grand scheme of things when you look at like the big picture of Heritor as a class. Again, their big shine is that they're able to wield basically any weapon that isn't ranged or most blunt weapons. So yeah, now we have Bard. Bard is A tier. I think Hurdy gets hated on quite a bit. They have the ability to restore MP, which, I mean, you look at Cannoneer and you understand that that's like a huge deal, being able to restore MP. Bard's MP restore is kind of weak though. It's only 10 MP. However, it does hit an area, so you can hit like 5 allies with the MP restore, whereas Cannoneer can only hit 1. So, you know, mathematically speaking, it's still a weaker MP restore, but the fact that you can spread it across multiple units in one cast is actually really, really strong. So that alone is almost like I could see why someone would want to put this in S tier. However, Bard, like, that's basically the only thing Bard does. Um, like, that's really, really high impact. Bard does have some good stuff. Like, it has Angel Song, which is regen, but it's only single target, so it's not that good because Summoner has like party wide regen. Um, they have the ability to basically one shot all undead, which is really cool. They have the hide ability, which is kind of underrated. Um, like, it's hide on paper doesn't really make a lot of sense, but the fact that you just become completely untargetable to anything that doesn't have the reveal support skill is really nice. Like, you even become untargetable to like illusion magic and stuff. So if you really like need your bard to like to not, if you need a unit to not be taking hits or whatever, you could just make them invisible for a little while. They also have the ability to raise defense and resistance. If it was this, like, if there was an ability that could raise both defense and resistance, then it would be good. But it does have a range on it, so you can hit multiple units with the defense raise or the resistance raise, so that's fine. And then they also have a HP restore and cleanse that hits an area, so that's good as well. So it's actually a really good support class. It has a lot of useful stuff, and the Magic Ballad, which restores the MP in the 5 tile, in those 5 tiles in the plus sign or whatever, is actually really good. I like it a lot, and I like pairing Hurdy with Juggler, so that if I want to, I can do Juggler shenanigans, and then also have the MP restore in my pocket whenever I want to use that too. So yeah, I don't know. I think Hurdy is kind of hated a little more than he should be. Bard is a really, really good support class. I'm sure the MP restore is kind of like lackluster, but really sometimes all you need is just that 10 MP, but across multiple units, so. Next we have Sky Pirate. God, I'm like losing my voice. It's been 3.5 hours. Oh no. Sky Pirate. I really like Sky Pirate. They take a lot of investment though, like way too much. If Sky Pirate was able to reach their maximum potential within a reasonable amount of time, I would probably put it in S tier. What's it called? It's not Trophy Hunt. It's Life of Crime. Their skill, Life of Crime, deals damage based on how many times you use the Steal command. So if you use the Steal command 1,000 times, you're doing max cap damage with it every single turn. So yeah, this class is crazy. It's better than Parivir when it's fully done, but the biggest problem is that you need to steal 1,000 times. So, and I'm pretty sure you also need accuracy up for the Life of Crime hit. Don't quote me on that though. But the other cool thing about Sky Pirate, and basically the only build you can really do on this class, is you go Shield Bearer, and you equip 2 Reverie Shields, and then you wear Ninja Garb and Thief's Hat, and also the green tier earring. And because this class gets a evasion up skill, it's the only evasion up skill in the game, and it's only hits itself. You can end up with like a 99% evasion, And so you basically never get hit by anything ever, and this becomes like the perfect evasion tank that also can one-shot things. So this, and because like your life of crime skill is the damage is only based on how many times you steal the weapon. Like it doesn't matter if you're not wearing a weapon or not. So this class is crazy. Oh, also when I was talking about leap earlier, this class has a self leap skill, so you can get extra movement and jump on itself, which is just randomly randomly kind of good. So yeah, again, I would probably put this in S tier, but it's just the fact that it takes so much investment to get to the point where it's crazy broken that I'm okay with keeping it in A tier. Okay, Dancer. Um, Dancer, if I have Sniper in A tier, I need to have Dancer in A tier. Dancer is basically the melee version of a Sniper. And because Dancer has basically a double shot ability. And then Dancer also has a basically like a Marlboro breath ability, which the cool thing about the dance, it's called Forbidden Dance. The cool thing about Forbidden Dance is that you don't even need Trank up for it, because every single debuff roll happens separately. So basically, whenever you use Forbidden Dance, you're guaranteed to have a debuff on somebody. And then if you do have Trank as well on Penilla before you use Forbidden Dance, then you're basically guaranteed to get all of the debuffs off. And so yeah, Penello is just Dancer as a class is pretty good in my opinion. I think it gets slept on a little bit because that's all that the Dancer really does. I don't know what their stat growths look like. I don't really care because usually I have Penello doing um, like assassin shenanigans. Uh, yeah, they do have like a physical range thing, which every melee unit should have. They have an attack and magic lower ability, which is fine. They also have a drain ability, which is pretty good. So they do have sustain. So the dancer class is actually pretty decent. It actually, you know what? You know what? I will put it in B tier. It's better off as like secondary to something else. Because again, I don't know what the stat growths look like, and I don't really care because if I'm using Penello's dancer class, then I'm probably leveling her up as sniper, so that she gets more attack, and then I probably switch her over to something like freaking like an assassin, because assassin can equip bows, and her actually I'm pretty sure blade dance only works with the bladed weapon. Let me check. Yeah, it does require a bladed weapon, but still, like I basically level up Penello as much as I can as a sniper, maybe a little bit in summoner so that I can get some better defense stats, and then she becomes like my assassin after that. So, and then I do still keep uh, dancer as her secondary skill, even though forbidden dance is like a combined together assassin skill, but you know it's a good class. It's good enough to not be awful. So here it is. And then lastly, we have Alcid, which is in the never used here. Alcid only gets it cannot change jobs, and it cannot have reaction or support ability. So it only gets its own abilities plus items. That's it. So it's in never used because it actively hurts himself to use him, because every other class in the game, except for like Chocobo Knight, can use two. It has both access to reaction support abilities and can use two different action commands. So, I mean, Alcid on his own has some interesting stuff in a class. Like he has um, the ability to reveal traps, which is cool. He has like a restore HP and remove debuff. He has a weird skill that makes the target berserk and also increases their critical hits. So you can kind of cause like one of your ally units to do lots of physical damage on paper. um, he has an attack plus speed down, so kind of like a Raptor ability, which is really good. but like his stuff is good. Oh yeah, he has grants regen and Astra to a female target. So like he has some really good stuff, but it's just the fact that he can't combine it with anything and that it's on its own. It's just I'm sorry, but no. And also its growths are apparently really shitty. So poor Alcid, if he was able to reclass and stuff, I think he would be like I think he would be a unit that people would use like unironically. So, anyways, that's it. Holy crap. I maybe talked way too long about that, but that's what my list looks like. Lots of S tier, but there's just a lot of good combinations in this game. So, here we are. And that's it. I wanted to talk about this because I do like Final Fantasy Tactics A2. I've been playing this game since forever, and it was interesting that I saw some recommendations for videos on this game that showed up this year. Even people making content on it, so that makes me happy because I thought I was like the only one who ever played this game. So here we are. But yeah, so let me know what you guys think. If you agree or disagree, if you think my controversial stuff is cringe or based, let me know. If for whatever reason Cruza Complex comes across this video and he wants to reply to my stuff like he did with Coffee Potato, then fucking go for it, man. Let me know what you think. I did try to explain some of the things I did disagree with you with. I tried to anyway. I don't remember everything you did. I didn't want to like go into making this list comparing my stuff to yours immediately. So like I'll have to compare on my own as well after, but yeah, anyways, no hard feelings is what I'm trying to say. And yeah, that's it. That's the tier list.